Okay, you guys, I know it's Wednesday, but this is actually the last video that I need to post to complete my daily upload schedule. So with this video finished, I'll have a video for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Why I decided to daily upload this week, I don't really know. I've kind of just been enjoying making the content, and I had a lot of videos I wanted to post. And thus far, I've kind of been restricting my uploads to certain days, like Monday and Tuesday, or Thursday and Friday. But I decided that, you know what, why not upload every day this week and see how it goes, see what days work, see what days don't work, things like that. Now, this video isn't really anything crazy, it's not even anything new. If you guys actively watch my content, you've probably seen all of these videos from the very last one all the way to the most recent. But, you know, this is something I plan on doing for a while. I want to make this a thing. 1 year of Whadasha, Adachi and Shimamura, then 2 years and 3 years, so on and so forth. It's been a year, you guys. Like I said, this video isn't anything new. If you've been here for a while, you've probably already seen all these videos. But if you aren't, this is going to be a compilation of 1 year of my Adachi and Shimamura videos. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys can see how my content has evolved over this year. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Thank you all so much for supporting me for as long as you have. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.
As a character, Hogetsu Shimamura has always fascinated me. Her way of thinking, the way she deals with conflict, none of them are like your average run-off-the-mill Yuri protagonist. Today I'll be delving into Hogetsu Shimamura's character and fully explaining her, starting from grade school all the way to where she is right now in the current light novel / manga. Similar to my Adachi explanation, I'll be starting with childhood and begin moving onwards from that. So we'll start with pre-middle school Shimamura. Around this point, she was 8 years old. Around this time, she had plenty of friends, however, only one really stuck out from the bunch, that being Tadami. Around this point in Shimamura's life, Tadami was one of the only people she could truly consider a friend, the only other one being her grandparents' dog, Gon. Shimamura as a child spent a lot of her time at the pool. Such was not the case with Tadami though. Tadami as a child was more on the diligent side according to Shimamura, as she was always busy with things at home. The best way to describe Shimamura as a child would be calling her a group leader. She was the one leading while the rest of her friends followed behind her in suit. Her childlike imagination was also extremely diverse. You could find her mentioning fighting aliens in space, or piranhas in jungles, or role-playing as sharks or crocodiles, etc. This was how her grade school days were spent. There's not much worth mentioning about her grade school days besides her connection with Tadami and her childlike tendencies. This is when Shimamura's rebellious phase initially begins. Shimamura had no obligation to follow school rules. Whether she wanted to leave an assembly early or not all depended on when she'd reach her mental capacity. I think it's worth mentioning that around this point, I do not think that Shimamura was in the best mental state, at least compared to her classmates. The way Shimamura viewed people as a whole was just depressing, to say the least. Even the sight of her classmates or the uniforms they all wore would disgust her. Part of the reason why this was because of Tadami going to a different school. After her and Tadami went separate ways, Shimamura established an ideology of sorts on how friendships work. To Shimamura, friendships by nature had no guarantee to last. They required a reason, an excuse to exist. Friendly feelings might have been a part of it, but only a part. Shimamura believed that relations were temporary. They were in the moment, but when compared to the present, they were meaningless. This whole view of relations has really shaped her character around this point. I feel like after thinking like this for so long, it will become easier to view yourself as a standalone entity, especially when you believe those relationships everyone was establishing around you would never last. I feel like it's safe to say that she hated other people due to this, and she believed that she was hated in return. Although we haven't really seen one character in this show that has verbally said that she hated Shimamura, so I think that was just one-sided on her end. It's at this point that Shimamura believes that she's become half of who she is today. In her words, she believed that she became Shima Hogetsu at this point, not Shimamura, but Shima. Although not confirmed, I believe that she becomes Shimamura after meeting Adachi. That is when Shimamura is at her 100% point. During middle school, little to no relations were formed besides some basketball club members. These club members that Shimamura made friends with, I guess you could say, but not really friends. I guess we'll say acquaintances. The basketball club member that Shimamura made acquaintances with actually did make some appearances later on. I think they made 2 different appearances in later chapters. And she also met this mystery character, as the community likes to call her. This mystery character was not a friend of Shimamura's. The best way to describe her would be an acquaintance. However, this person played a very big role in the progression of Shimamura. She showed Shimamura that even when there was no excuse for 2 people to become kindled, a bond of sorts could still be formed, even when no friendly feelings were involved. That's the main takeaway from her character. After this whole entire chapter, she was never mentioned again, but her short appearance definitely molded Shimamura into who she'd later become. I feel like it's safe to say that Shimamura took some bits of that mystery character's ideology and reiterated what she already had believed. Also, this mystery character, the reason they're called mystery character is because Shimamura couldn't be bothered to remember her name. She's not entirely mysterious. I feel like her personality is very straightforward. It's not too much mysterious about her. Her name is just unknown, which is why she's known as the mystery character. Upon entering high school, we see subtle amounts of change from Shimamura, this mostly being how she was much more open with the people around her as opposed to how she was in middle school, and her newly found motivation to participate in school activities, mainly being due to Adachi. Shimamura's high school life was already off to a better start than her middle school life. As the story progresses, Shimamura becomes much more willing to talk to her peers, hence the reason why she befriended Hino, Nagafuji, and later on Sancho, Delos, and Pancho. Although she had Hino and Nagafuji in the start, it was very clear that Shimamura still kept her distance from these two. They certainly wouldn't be her first choices, but they would always be there if all else failed. It was that sort of thing with her. Now, when talking about pre-Adachi meeting, this is all that you really can say. It didn't take too long for Shimamura and Adachi to meet at all. They met relatively soon after entering high school. Around the start of the series, Adachi and Shimamura had a lot of similarities in their personalities, but that is, I would only go as far to say personalities to extents. As people, they have absolutely no similarities whatsoever. Shimamura and Shimamura has completely different nature than Adachi, I will say that. They also come from different upcomings. They're just not the same. That's what I want to get across. I see a lot of people say that these characters are very identical. They're not at all. But as we know, Shimamura always tended to keep a fair amount of distance between her and others, and someone like Adachi, who didn't even care for her to begin with, was a perfect match. A girl who always kept her distance and a girl who didn't even care about the other one. That is why I think they got along so well. Neither of them had restrictions to hold up around each other, since neither of them cared exceptionally, and I think this is what brought them so close. With that, it didn't take that long between her and Adachi to gradually become closer, and the distance between them also grew smaller and smaller. It's also worth mentioning that yes, the distance between her and Adachi did grow smaller, but it was always there. A good example of this would be a glass wall standing in between two people. This habit Shimamura picked up during middle school would always be there to follow her. The only time that distance is 100% removed is where we are right now in the light novel, volume 11, and maybe a couple of volumes before this, but the distance didn't really get removed until a little bit after they started going out. Especially after Adachi's breakdown, there was always some distance between them. And also, if you haven't noticed, Shimamura and Adachi's relationship initially was fairly similar to a relationship with a mystery girl from the previous section, the girl from volume 9 chapter 1. So what separates them? How come Shimamura became close with Adachi but not the other girl? Firstly, incentives played a part. The mystery girl herself did not want to become friends with Shimamura. She did not care for Shimamura, and Shimamura for the most part didn't care about her either. That was the type of relationship they had. There was no mutual friendly feelings, none of that. One of them could probably die and the other one probably wouldn't even have too many feelings about it. Why would they? They weren't close after all. The mystery girl viewed these types of relationships as valuable. She enjoyed being able to speak without having to restrict herself around others. It might even be fair to say that she sought for these relationships. This was once again yet another thing that she had passed on to Shimamura. Despite Shimamura's vague memory of her, she considers her interactions with the girl enjoyable, meaning that she herself was also a fan of these interactions. The point of this is to say that the relationship Shimamura had built with the mysterious girl was solely based on distance, the distance they had between each other. As long as they talked, there was never going to be any friendly feelings. It isn't like they talked for a day or two. They often went home after school together since they lived relatively close, and during that time they bonded. Not one bit, not at all. That was not the type of relationship they shared. This was not the same with Adachi. Although distance was definitely there, Shimamura at some point had accepted Adachi for who she was and allowed herself to bond with her, even if only a little bit, which was something we hadn't seen her do at all prior to high school, except with Tadami when they were both children. The reason for this might really just be Shimamura maturing, or the fact that she possibly had an interest in Adachi from the get-go. Maybe not a romantical interest, but an interest as a person. But honestly, I feel like both could be valid reasons. And as far as Shimamura's high school life, that's really all there is to say. She met Adachi. At first, there was a lot of distance between them. Over time, they grew closer. They started dating. And once again, Shimamura reevaluated the way she viewed relationships. And that's really because Adachi is one of the few people in her life that hasn't come and go. Like, if we talk about everyone so far, Tadami came and went. The girl from the basketball club came and went. The mystery girl, she came and went. Adachi is the only person that actually stayed by Shimamura throughout the whole entire show without ever leaving. And I feel like that's why Shimamura can see herself with Adachi in 10 years time. And I think that's just really nice to think about. And that wraps up fully describing Hogetsu Shimamura. For all my viewers that are just as knowledgeable about this series as me, I'm sure you're all aware that I've skipped some information on Shimamura. No, I didn't forget. I only meant to include all the important information first, but now I'm going to include all of the things which I didn't include at the start. Starting with middle school Shimamura. One of the things that I skipped was Shimamura's first crush. The reason why this was skipped was because her first crush played little to no role in shaping Shimamura. And if you're curious, her first crush was Chiki from another one of Iruma Hitoma's works, Hatsukoi Kisu. Although Chiki makes a very brief appearance, it's very clear to see that she doesn't care too much for Shimamura, likewise with Shimamura towards the girl herself. Although Shimamura never mentions exactly what she liked about the girl, based on what we've seen about middle school Shimamura so far, it's safe to say she was probably attracted to her diversity. Chiki is also fairly similar to the mysterious girl as well in terms of their relationship. Chiki would come and then go just like everyone else, leaving little to no impact on Shimamura at all. Even calling her a first crush to me seems kinda wrong, especially since Shimamura herself didn't take that crush too serious as she laughed it off shortly after her final meeting with Chiki. Now, what I'll say is, I'm not entirely sure of what Chiki's whole point of being in this show was. I don't know if that was just a cameo to promote Iruma Hitoma's new work or not. I'm sure she had some deeper meaning than what I'm seeing, but I just don't understand it. Was she trying to foreshadow Shimamura liking girls or something? I don't know. I really don't know. I can't tell you. But she didn't morph Shimamura's ideology by any means, which is why I didn't put it in. A lot of this video has been focused on the ideology because that is a big part of who Shimamura is and why she's acted the way that she does to others throughout the whole series. And I'm sure there's more that I'm missing, but truth be told, off the top of my head, I don't remember it. Anyone who knows what I'm missing can put it in the comments. Same with my points. If anything was wrong, incorrect, or you don't agree with it, you can put that in the comments as well. Of course, I'm not going to argue with any of you over that. If that's what y'all want to put in the comments, y'all can put that. My goal here is to further everyone's understanding of Hogetsu Shimamura. It's not to start arguments about what I believe. It's not to start arguments about maybe what Shimamura believed. Anything that further deepens anyone's understanding of the show, my goal is fulfilled. And I think I can end the video here. This was a much longer video than my Adachi video, and that's just because there was more to talk about with Shimamura. Shimamura has a full childhood. With the utmost respect, Adachi does not have that. She just doesn't. But yeah, so I have to say, in my next video, I'm probably going to go over maybe Hino or Nagafuji, maybe Tadumi, or I might branch out to different shows. Right now, I'm really satisfied on how my Adachi and Shimamura videos are doing, and I enjoy making them because I love this whole entire story. I think Iruma Hitoma is a mastermind when it comes to writing. Every show he's written has been amazing. Hatsukoi Kisu, if you haven't seen it, I recommend y'all go read that as well. That's also really good, especially if you like Adashima. Some characters like Nagafuji and Hino were mentioned in it. Well, yeah, all I have to say, and I'll see y'all next time. Deep delving into Adachi Sakura's character from Adachi to Shimamura. At face value, Adachi is really nothing special. She's your average introverted high school girl, nothing much. But to fully delve into her character, you need to know her childhood, because her childhood played a big reason in why she's how she is today. So as a child, Adachi and her parents never really got along. I don't think we've heard anything about Adachi's father, but we've known that her mother has been there the whole time for Adachi. So her mother, Adachi Atsuka has not been the best mother to say. Even as a child, when Adachi would want things like toys or want like a snack or something, she would never ask her mother to get that. I don't know if it was because she was scared of her mother. I don't know what the reason was. She just never had a strong bond with her mother. And Adachi Atsuka, for whatever reason, she never thought that it was odd that her daughter never talked to her. She has never made an effort to ever talk to Adachi, and she still doesn't, like 8 volumes later. It's crazy. The only time Atsuka has ever managed to talk to Adachi has been when Shimamura herself had to add herself as a third party into this. Shimamura had to add herself. She had to tell Adachi's mother about Adachi. She had to tell her that maybe she should try doing these things with Adachi. And that is the only time we have ever seen her attempt to be there for Adachi. And I really think that's crazy, to be honest. And at this point, it's no longer only Adachi's mother. Adachi herself has never chosen to make any form of contact towards her mother. This has been a problem since earlier chapters. It's just not who Adachi is as a person. So this chapter goes more into detail about how Adachi feels about her mother. This is well, it's not our main setting. This is kind of a different setting when they're both adults, like later on in the story. But still, Adachi has felt the same the whole show. This is how she feels about her mother. So, there at last, I was able to put into words my final message to my mother. It wasn't the case that it was too late for it. Hardly. After all, this wasn't something that I could ever have said to her face. We both made our fair share of mistakes, and yet, Mother, the future looks bright for me. I'm never going to call you. I'm never going to come visit you. I'm never going to ask you for anything. I will show you with my actions, not my words, that I am truly happy. So, although this is a very, very short little paragraph spoken from Adachi, you can really see that she's emphasizing on the fact that she's never going to rely on her mother for anything. This really shows you her relationship with her mother. I don't think it's going to ever get better. This is kind of the closure of her and her mother. I don't think we're going to be seeing much more from her and her mother. It's just not something that will work out. Alright, now that we've gotten Adachi's childhood out the way, let's go to the start of the show so we can really begin discussing her. So after all the events that happened during her childhood with her mother, we can see why Adachi is the way that she is. Adachi is... She's an introvert. She's an introvert for good reasons. She has never been able to truly be herself around anyone. And Shimamura is really the only person who I think she's been able to be herself around. I think Shimamura is the only person Adachi has ever really been happy to be around. Once again, proven by Adachi here. Of all the people I'd met in my life, almost none of them ever liked me. Mostly it was my fault. Either they showed no interest, or if they did, they ultimately drifted away before I could figure out how to reciprocate. I didn't chase them, I just kept on walking. So the problem was entirely mine, and I would probably never fix it as long as I lived. Because my dream had already come true, maybe I wasn't a people person, but I couldn't live without Shimamura. She was a perfect match for my hopes and prayers and desires for the future. She was the missing puzzle piece in my life. I needed her, and I fell for her, and she had fallen for me in return. I was the luckiest girl in the world. In my honest opinion, Adachi as a character is really only her childhood. It doesn't get much deeper than that. I feel like Adachi doesn't really have that much progression throughout the whole entire show. The only times we really see big jumps in progression is the very, very start of the series when she first meets Shimamura. She's known to be cold towards other people. She's not too open with other people. She keeps her distance. She has the delinquent title. Later on, once we see her get more comfortable with Shimamura, however, we see her act a lot more crazy, I guess you could say crazy, a lot more open, a lot more comfortable. And I feel like that's the most progression we really see from Adachi throughout this whole entire series. By no means is Adachi as complex as a character as Shimamura. Actually, we've also seen her progression when she had her little breakdown that also shaped her as a character. That's when she first learned that there's boundaries that she needs to, not overstep as long as she's going to be with Shimamura. I really feel like that's all there is to be said. Adachi is not a person who has all these relations like Shimamura. Adachi does not have that. It has only been her mother who has shaped her. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys. If I did miss out on anything, I hope I'm not. A lot of this is going off of muscle memory. Not, of course, the whole video because I'm putting, quotes in here, but a lot of this is just going off of muscle memory. If I miss anything, feel free to correct me in the comments so other people don't get the wrong idea. One thing I also do want to clear up is that Adachi Atsuka is not completely at fault. Adachi's mother is not the only one at fault. I do believe Adachi played a part. After a certain point, I feel like she could have done something to better her relationship with her mother and, to better herself as a whole, but she just never worked towards it. Alright, so the Adachi and Shimamura light novel updated. Now is probably as best of a time as ever to begin discussing it because the manga is getting into really good parts that I want to talk about. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be discussing the recent chapter. So, let's get into it. The chapter begins with Shimamura dwelling on a quote which one of her teachers said to her in the past. The only way for your soul to grow is to face your challenges with an open mind and an earnest heart. In the light novel, this quote is actually different. The light novel quote states, you must face things head on. If you don't, you won't be able to be true to yourself. I feel like this quote is more suited for this chapter because this whole volume delves more into Shimamura as a character. There's conflicts within this arc which she has to come to terms with to be true to herself and the people around her. Around this time, middle school Shimamura had already secluded herself from the environment around her. We see more information about this in volumes 9 and 10 about why exactly Shimamura secluded herself from the world. For some more information on that, you can check out my delving into Shimamura Hogetsu video. I feel like I described that pretty well. But this one manga chapter, the art for this is really good. One thing that I've always loved about the Adachi and Shimamura series is Shimamura's facial expressions. Her facial expressions always say so much without saying anything at all. Going down a little more, you can see that this lifestyle that Shimamura has maintained, a life where she cannot be true to herself, a life where she cannot be true to other people, this has become commonplace to her, and she would likely be like this for the rest of her life. This is one of the conflicts that she's going to have to overcome within this volume. Next, we're presented with Adachi suffering something similar to Shimamura. We see a clear difference between the two. Shimamura willingly chose not to interact with other people, whilst Adachi had made efforts and failed. This is also why Adachi is as introverted as she is. It's quite sad. I always feel quite sad when we get these Adachi scenes. It's always sad being secluded from society, no matter what the context is. And someone like Adachi, who has been secluded her whole life, I can't even begin discussing how sad that is. But like I said, we get a similar dialogue. I thought it'd always be like this. I would meet new people, inevitably fail, and have my dreams slip away from me. But I knew I could always step back, keep my head down, and let the time heal all my pain and regret. The difference between this is, though, we see that Shimamura has acknowledged the fact that this was likely going to be how she's going to be her whole life, while Adachi has not accepted that fact. Adachi has a goal in mind now. She wants to get closer to Shimamura so that she no longer can live her life like this. She has to change. See how there's a clear difference? This is one of the reasons why we didn't get a main Adachi focused POV for this arc. Adachi has already come to terms with what she has to do. Shimamura has not come to terms with what she has to do, what has to change. She hasn't come to terms with that yet. She also acknowledges the path ahead and how difficult it would be, but she doesn't care because she still needs to move forward to be true to Shimamura. And that's one of the best things about Adachi. But shortly after, Adachi is cut down because Shimamura is heading to her grandparents in the countryside to celebrate Obon. Obon it's an annual Buddhist event for commemorating one's ancestors. Adachi, she doesn't celebrate this. There's many reasons why she doesn't celebrate this. One of the main reasons being she's not close with her family. She's likely not close with her relatives. All you need to know is that Adachi doesn't celebrate this. So after asking to hang out, Shimamura has to reject her because she's not going to be there, which of course kind of upsets Adachi a little bit. Shimamura is going to be gone for 3 nights and 4 days. But you know, they can always hang out when she gets back, so there's no issue there. Shimamura also promises to call Adachi when she's back. She knows in the back of her mind that if she doesn't do that, Adachi would be sitting there eagerly until she gets back. To reinforce that statement, I'd even wait in your room if it meant I could see you a second earlier. I love Adachi. I also love the character. I really love the drip that they gave for this arc. Her design is so nice. Like, when I was reading the light novel a while back, I didn't think she would be wearing an outfit this dripped out for this. Well, although she can't hang out with Shimamura, Shimamura goes and gets her a consolation prize. A consolation prize for being rejected. I don't know. But basically, this consolation prize is mineral water and a popsicle because it was pretty hot out. Once again, Shimamura, she doesn't even understand herself. I love that. Of course, she hands this to Adachi, and it is now time for Shimamura to go, or prepare to go. Now, following this, we get a really important little, some panels that I want to talk about. Adachi states, right, it all started on a hot day, just like this, referencing when they first met in the, upstairs gym thing. The day the old me died and was replaced by who I am now. I actually didn't acknowledge this when I was reading the light novel, but Adachi has really come to terms with who she is now. She knows she's a different person than she was in the start, and she doesn't hate that. You know, she's moving forward, mainly so for Shimamura's sake, more so than her own sake. And even though in hindsight that seems bad, it's actually really good because the Adachi of before was someone who was not living in the present or the future. She was somebody who was living in the past, not moving forward. So this is an important panel that I really think everybody should be taking into account when they're reading this. All that matters is the present, the future, and every step closer I take towards her. She is the polar opposite of how she was when we started reading this manga, this series, everything. Now we get a POV switch. Does Adachi celebrate Oban? Nah, I doubt it. I doubt it too. She's sort of got a city girl vibe to her. Does she? I don't know. I don't think she does. Hey, get your stuff ready. We're heading out. Okay, yep. Yashiro. Hey, you promised not to eat on the bed. No, I don't think I did. Oh, right. That was my sister. Just average Yashiro Shimamura shenanigans. Oh, she actually acknowledges Yashiro. It's weird how relaxed I feel hanging around this kid. Like anything goes with her. No worries, no concerns at all. Wait, was this in the light novel? I don't remember Shimamura acknowledging Yashiro. Once again though, I love Shimamura's facial expressions. I love her facial expressions so much in the light novel. The light novel just... They adapted this so well. Alright, we have show. Hey, Oni-chan, that's us. We're leaving now. Right. Okay, all set. Well, except for one thing. Doesn't matter. You could say that. What trip are you? Yeah. I see. Worry not. I shall watch over the house for you. I remember this. No, you won't. Why? Aw, cheer up. I'll bring back snacks if you're good. But I'm always good. How's she planning to even do that? Are there any convenience stores in that backwater? There's almost nothing there. No people, no cars, but there is one thing. A friend. Gone. A friend of 10 years. A friend I was always so eager to meet. See you later, don't forget my snacks. So when exactly did my anticipation become colored with equal parts of excitement and sadness? So let me elaborate on that. For that, she's talking about Gon. The friend she was talking about from 10 years ago is not a human being. It's a dog named Gon. So basically, as the years progress, Gon has progressively got into a worse and worse state. Gon is getting really old. He's blind in one eye. He no longer has the stamina. And keep in mind, Gon is a friend Shimamura has known her whole life. 10 years. So Gon has practically grown with her. So... when exactly did my anticipation become colored with equal parts of excitement and sadness? It was around the time Gon started getting old, sadly, because at this point, Shimamura is, of course, she's excited to meet Gon, but at the same time, she knows this is going to be very heart-wrenching for her. It's going to be a blast of the past, something she's going to have to come to terms with. This is a really good arc for Shimamura. Like, it's the pavement for the Shimamura we see after this. Like, quote me on this, after this arc, Shimamura is going to act very different. She's going to act like a different person because she has an idea of what she needs to be doing and what she needs to be moving towards. So, oh man, that's the end already? Man, Shimamura in the light novel looks so much mature than what she does in the manga. That's not a bad thing. Oh, they also changed Shimamura's hairstyle. Wait, she looks like two completely different people. I already noticed that, but... even more so, Shimamura looks so much younger. I don't know, maybe that's why I prefer the light novel over the manga. It just has so much more realistic elements, perhaps. Actually, maybe the manga portrays her better. Which do you guys think? Do you guys think she's portrayed better in the manga or the light novel? Okay, so I actually want to go over chapter 30.5. I don't know why they made this half a chapter instead of just adding it. Because after the ending of the other chapter, which is 31, this follows it, but for some reason they made it half a chapter. I don't know. So basically what happens is Adachi is thinking about how she should thank Shimamura for the popsicle. She thinks that she should maybe add a heart to the message. Of course, Adachi being Adachi, we all know why she wanted to add a heart to the message. So for some reason she acts on impulse and decides to actually do this. So she sends the heart. She tries to delete it, but it's too late. It's already went through to Shimamura. Shimamura gets a text, reads it, and decides to reply with a heart. But yeah, I really look forward to covering more of these manga chapters because I feel like elaborating on them is really fun, and making connections directly back to a light novel is really fun. So hopefully I'll see you guys soon. I do have more videos planned. I don't really have the time to throw these videos out consistently. I think I've also mentioned the fact that I have a second channel too, which I post on. My second channel is a lot more prominent than this one. But I do have a lot more fun posting on this channel though. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see y'all later. So it's normally my rule of thumb in life to stay pretty passive when it comes to
talking about things I'm not too knowledgeable on, but I'm making an exception for this video because this is an ongoing question I've seen so many people ask, so I'm sure a lot of you guys just want an answer, so I'm going to try my best to answer this. Will Adachi and Shimamura get a second season? Is the possibility there? Similar to a lot of other shows of this genre, the possibility is always there, but it's always extremely low. The possibility is extremely low because the chances of a Yuri show even getting picked up and animated is already low. I feel like that's something that needs to be taken into account. The fact that Adachi and Shimamura even got an adaptation in general is already a unanimous feat. A second season, probably gonna be pushing it. I'm gonna be honest with you, out of every single Yuri show we've seen, I don't think a single one has gotten a second season. Yes, that includes Bloom Into You. Bloom Into You, or Yagate Kimi ni Naru, is one of the more well-received Yuri shows in the whole entire genre. Bloom Into You is definitely up there, yet Bloom Into You did not get a second season. Now, I'm sure it wasn't a case of material. I believe Yagate Kimi ni Naru had enough material for a second season. It still never got a second season. So once again, like I stated, the possibility is always there. It's just not likely to happen. And if it does happen, it's going to be in years' time. Honestly, I don't even think a season 2 is the main focus whatsoever, since the light novel is getting patched up soon. Of course, it will be good to have a second season, but it's probably not going to happen. Studios don't want to animate these shows. For most Yuri shows, there's always a lack of funding when it comes to them. And even if they're well received, they still don't get adaptations. It's a sad reality. But of course, Adachi and Shimamura can show us something we've never seen before. So what if all these shows don't get a second season? It's just speculation. Shoot, Adachi and Shimamura could have a second season announced by tomorrow and everything I said could be completely blown out of the water. It's completely speculation. Believe what you want to believe. If you think it'll get a second season, believe that. If you don't, then don't. But if you want a more realistic approach, you can check how the sales of Adachi and Shimamura went and compare them to other shows which get a second season. That is always something you can do. I'm personally not going to go into that because when it comes to sales and funding, I'm not sure what it takes to get a second season. I'm not sure what the average amount of sales for a second season is. Of course, I could do the research, but I'm going to ultimately leave that up to you guys. That's all I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Yashiro Chikama is a character that embodies simplicity and complexity. Yashiro is a character who appears as early into the series as Volume 1 with seemingly no purpose except for comedic relief. However, as the chapters begin piling up, Yashiro begins telling our characters that she's not actually human, and that she's an alien. Initially, this whole concept wasn't taken all that serious, mainly being due to Yashiro's character as a whole, but as the story develops, that concept begins becoming almost impossible to write off as not true. We see Yashiro do many things which average people cannot do: floating, teleporting, mind reading, spatial awareness, body reformation, and the list probably goes on, to be honest. But this isn't where the limitations of Yashiro end. Her role is much more significant than only being the odd one out. In Volume 8, Chapter 1 on page 39, Yashiro begins dumping a lot of crucial lore necessary to connect the later bits of the story. She states that no matter the reality, Shimamura and Adachi are always destined to meet. This is a very piece of crucial lore because we backtrack to Volume 7, Chapter 1, if they hadn't met on the gym's second floor, we see that they still end up meeting in their later years despite not meeting in high school, this being proof that Yashiro is not lying. By fate, Adachi and Shimamura will always meet regardless of the year, time, or place. For the most part, that is true. But how did this all connect back to Yashiro? In the anime special novels, aka BDs or Blu-ray discs, focus on BD4 for a little bit, we learn that Yashiro made a promise with Shimamura from a different timeline, a promise proposed by Shimamura. If she doesn't manage to find Adachi, will Yashiro help her out? That is the start of it all. If for some reason Adachi and Shimamura, whatever the circumstances are, do not meet in whatever timeline they are in, Yashiro will intervene in the system. Although this is a pretty rare instance since Adachi and Shimamura are fated to meet, there are also times where Yashiro just steps in and assists anyways just to be sure. These tasks are nowhere near easy. For example, when we see Yashiro and Chito, their journey was not short at all.
Yashiro stayed with Chito for a couple of years before they even ended up finding Shimamura. Yashiro is a character who gets gradual yet extreme character development throughout the series, and I believe that it's handled magnificently. It's really nice to see that they gave her a purpose that actually fits this story and actually illuminates her as a character that holds significance to this story as opposed to someone who is just there for comedic relief. Now, I had a couple more things I wanted to talk about regarding Yashiro Chikama, but I'm going to have to cut this video short as I also have other things I need to work on. I pretty much got everything big out of the way regarding Yashiro Chikama, which is why I feel like ending it here will also be a very safe point to do so. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I might make a video on Tatami next, or maybe something relating to volume 12, but that's all I have to say. Once again, thank you everyone who has been supporting this channel, thank you everyone who has made it this far, and I will see you soon. Adachi and Shimamura 99.9 was amazing. It was a great conclusion from BD4, which everyone can agree was quite bittersweet for Shimamura. And it also offers closure for BD4 as well. The conclusion chapter from BD4 called And begins with Shimamura and Yashiro walking into someplace unknown. It is then that Yashiro states, "It is a promise," seemingly out of nowhere after receiving 2 donuts from Shimamura, to which Shimamura says she doesn't remember the promise. If you guys remember, this promise ties directly back to BD4. In BD4, Yashiro offers Shimamura space secrets in return for donuts. However, space secrets were not what Shimamura was interested in. She wanted to know if she would ever be able to see Adachi again, to which Yashiro said she would be able to. And this eventually leads into the promise of Yashiro reuniting every Adachi and Shimamura who didn't meet, which is what Yashiro is referring to in the text above. Right now, it makes no sense, but as the chapter progresses, we will see just exactly what she means. After this interaction, Yashiro then begins leading Shimamura to somewhere unknown, which she describes as someplace nice, and also says that it'll be fun. While Shimamura is following Yashiro, she notices some sort of petals falling from the sky. She remembers hearing the name of the petals before, however, she can no longer remember the name of them. It's also then that Shimamura wonders what she was even doing outside to begin with. Here we can see the obvious symptoms of Shimamura progressing in age. Her memories were becoming a haze of what they formerly were. At this point, it's probably safe to say that she was just letting the wind push her along, and wherever she ended up, that would just be that. With that said, it is quite sad. However, that was the reality for the Shimamura of this timeline. There was nothing else to really be done, except just exist. Yashiro and Shimamura continued walking, and walking, and walking. They passed a supermarket and a gasoline station. They were pretty far out at this point, and Shimamura felt that she had no choice but to follow Yashiro. And after all that walking, they eventually reached a flood bank with a clear view of the river. It's here that Shimamura realizes that she'd been here before, and she'd also been here with Yashiro before. It was at the festival she'd gone to with Tatami, Sho, and Yashiro. It's then that Yashiro stops her movements and asks if Shimamura is ready. Not sure as to what she should be ready for, Shimamura questions Yashiro, only for an image of herself from high school floating in space to be reflected from her eyes. "Please walk straight from here," Yashiro instructs Shimamura while cycling behind her. "The promise dictated that I bring you here. The promise dictates that you walk forward." It's here that Yashiro once again sounds like a completely different person, and I think that this is just her alien-like nature. Yashiro always acts so innocent, so childlike, that the time she does end up switching serious, it completely changes the atmosphere of the story, and that's really emphasized here. After Shimamura realizes that Yashiro would not be accompanying her, she believes that this may very well be the last time they meet, and so she parts from Yashiro, walking forward, feeling lonely as if saying goodbye to a good friend for the last and final time. As Shimamura continues walking forward, the bridge she was walking on disappears along with the river as well. The only thing that remained was a familiar looking staircase in front of her, which she climbs, only to find a door waiting for her afterwards. She opens the door, and through the darkness, she sees no one. However, shortly after, Shimamura realizes that just because she couldn't see anyone didn't mean that they weren't there. This is obviously a reference to the Adachi of her timeline that had passed. Even though she couldn't see Adachi, she knew that Adachi would still be there by her side, and she's applying that to her situation here as well. Just because she couldn't see anyone roaming around didn't mean that they weren't there. Shimamura also notices a spot near the wall, to which she makes out a brief figure sitting there, all alone. It's here that the story changes around a little bit. We never knew who arrived at the second floor of the gym first. Alright, pause, I have something I want to add here. After re-looking over this part, I thought to myself, is it true that we don't know who was on the second floor of the gym first? And after re-looking over the manga, light novel, and anime, we do know. In the anime, it shows that Shimamura was there first. However, in the light novel and manga adaptation, Adachi is the first one who's there. So there's really no answer. I don't know. I don't know if this means... Do as you will with that information. I just thought I would make it clear. Although Shimamura's memories were blurry and all over the place, she recalled meeting with someone here. Her skin remembered the warmth, the sweat that came with the summer. It was the second floor of the gym. Following Yashido's instructions, she continues walking forward, walking towards the ping pong table, praying that something, anything would happen. And as she grew closer to the wall vanished, revealing a completely different scene from where she was previously at. She was now at her grandparents' house completely in the countryside. Mere moments later, the door to the house opens, revealing two figures, her grandmother and grandfather. After forcing their conversation to a halt, they smiled and welcomed her with open arms. However, this wasn't where she was supposed to be. This wasn't her final destination. She hears a voice calling her from somewhere unreachable. In that instant, she rejects her grandparents, saying, "No, sorry, I have somewhere else I need to go." Once again, the scenery was changed. This time, it was a place she had been at not so long ago. The apartment she had moved into, with her. After exploring the house and saying goodbyes to some of her precious belongings, she made her way through the window, out the balcony, and into the sky. Was it the ground she was walking on, or the sky? Before she could even have a chance to answer that question, the scenery shifted, once more. After preparing herself for what she'd see next, no longer was she in a state of deja vu. This place was entirely new to her. She was surrounded by a multitude of things, with flower petals raining all over her. This place was nowhere she had ever seen before. A park shaped like a half circle. In the corner of her eye, she could see playground equipment and the likes. There was a sign located near the entrance. The text was barely audible. However, it read out, "Mura." In the middle of that park stood a large tree, perhaps planted there to grant some shade. Next to it stood a figure, her hair and skirt fluttering in the wind. I was greeted by a sweet scent and a flood of memories. The tip of my tongue tingled, and a word formed on my lips. Now I remembered. The name of these flowers which had been falling this whole time. Such a long time. Slowly, silently, as if leaping up, her voice reached out to me. She was delighted, of course, but she'd also had to wait a long, long time. The girl, wearing the same school uniform as I was, had been waiting for me for so long. Her voice had the same color to it as the falling petals. It was so lovely, so peaceful, so kind, so full of hope. And it smelled good too. Her face twisted into an ever deeper smile. So did her voice, rendering her words unintelligible. In all possible ways, it felt like she'd become her old self. "Hooray, we're both young." She stared at me for a moment and then responded, sounding almost a little panicked. "Hooray." The way she did that, awkwardly lifting both of her hands into the air. How I'd missed that. My heart was elevated to such heights, it made me feel like I was soaring through the sky. So, we were able to see each other again. Which one of us said that? It was neither clear, nor did it matter, for we both felt the exact same way. A promise. Her voice, her words, everything she gave me tickled me so. There'd never been any guarantee that I'd see her again, yet I was glad I hadn't stopped on my way here. Perhaps I'd given up on my memories, but that mattered not, for we could still make plenty more. Adachi and Shimamura.
Alright, so that's the video. The goal was to kind of keep it shortish so I could go over my own personal thoughts and opinions on it towards the end. So yes, Adachi and Shimamura 99.9 is amazing, and it's probably going to be very emotional for most people reading it. If you couldn't tell by my explaining, which you probably couldn't because a lot of things are being left out just for the sake of this video not taking all year. We follow Shimamura as she progresses through death. We see her go through her memories, see if she wants to abandon her memories in order to meet Adachi again, or if she wants to maintain her memories in order to never see Adachi again. We basically see her pick Adachi over everything, which eventually leads to her and Adachi meeting again in the afterlife. So once again,
It's still pretty bittersweet, but I think this is the best outcome the Shimamura of this timeline can have. If it wasn't this option, it would just be Shimamura living her life completely alone, which is what we saw in BD4. And also, Yashido was a very interesting character during this chapter as well. Previously, back in BD4, Yashido apparently cannot see when exactly humans are going to die, but it seems like she has some gist of just when humans are going to die. That's what I think the whole point of her leading Shimamura far away to this bridge was. She kind of knew Shimamura was going to die to some extent. We kind of also see some foreshadowing for Shimamura dying in BD4 as well from Yashido. And I think that's all I really want to say. I think that's all that there really is to be said. The ending was very sad, but you know, it's bittersweet, right? They still meet, but anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for everyone who's stuck by this whole entire video. This was one of the more fun videos to make for me. And see you guys in my next video. So I'm scrolling through YouTube to see if there's any video about Tatami, and to no one's surprise, there isn't. So this is going to be my next delving into video. Wait, what's going... Do you guys see that? So, delving into Tatami, the most unfortunate character in the series Adachi and Shimamura, and ironically one of my favorites just because she represents a sense of realism. For those of you that don't know or maybe forgot, Tatami is Shimamura's childhood friend and Adachi's potential rival early on. Tatami was introduced in episode 7 of the anime, volume 3 of the light novel, and chapter 15 of the manga. Despite Tatami being a recurring character in the series from these points onward, she herself does not have that many scenes that leave an impression on the series, and that's just because of the fact that Tatami is a character that was never meant to be special. I believe that since the introduction of Tatami, Irumi Hitoma knew what exactly her purpose would be and exactly how to use her. In the most positive way possible, Tatami never had a place in this series. Tatami actively represents what our characters are trying to get away from: the past. Tatami is part of Shimamura's past that she's actively trying to get away from and grow from as a person. And with that knowledge alone, you could already conclude this video and say that Tatami is the most unfortunate because of how the story portrayed her. But that's not what I'm going to do because there's still more that can be said. Now, similar to all my delving into videos, we are going to begin at Tatami's childhood. According to Shimamura, as a child, Tatami was more on the diligent side. She never really left the house because she was busy studying or being productive to some extent. Despite not being around Shimamura as often as other people were, Shimamura still considered Tatami as her #1 friend at the time, and likewise, Tatami believed that Shimamura was her #1 as well. And even as far back as Tatami's childhood, it's clear that Tatami held some sort of feelings for Shimamura. We can see that in a lot of their interactions, from her dialogue and generally just the manner she portrayed herself in front of Shimamura. And similar to Shimamura's childhood, Tatami's days were being wasted away. Upon entering middle school, it's not stated why, but Tatami had attended a different school from Shimamura. This impacted Shimamura negatively, as we know from her rebellious phase, and likewise also most likely impacted Tatami negatively. But we generally just don't know how this act of separation affected her because we've never got any information from Tatami herself. Kind of shocking to me that we've never gotten a Tatami POV, considering the fact that we got a POV from someone that was interested in Adachi from middle school, but I digress. Since we don't have any information about Tatami from middle school, I can't say anything about it. We don't know what she was doing or how she spent her days or what her mental state was like. There's just simply nothing we can say with the information that's been provided, so we're going to move forward to her high school days. Upon entering high school, Tatami took on a delinquent act of sorts. We don't really know why, but my guess is to match how Shimamura portrayed herself in middle school, thinking that it would make them ever so slightly closer again. Ever since Tatami and Shimamura reunited in high school, Tatami has tried her hardest to migrate into Shimamura's life little by little, but no matter what she did, she couldn't overcome the greatest obstacle, known as time. This was something Tatami couldn't accept. No matter what, Tatami wanted to be in Shimamura's life again, but it simply just wasn't possible. On top of time already showing distinct differences between her and Shimamura, Adachi was also a factor in why Tatami could never triumph. She was fighting for a spot that was already taken. Even before Shimamura and Adachi started dating, Shimamura put Adachi above Tatami even if those weren't her intentions. This wasn't an act of Shimamura being cold or heartless, it's Shimamura simply just being realistic. Tatami's time had long since passed, and generally, It was just fate why she was in the situation that she was in. Shimamura and Adachi will meet in every single timeline no matter what. And with that in mind, there was never any room for Tadami to begin with. Tadami was always fighting a losing battle. All the odds possible were against her. Time had caused them to grow differently as people. Shimamura already had someone she considered to be number one, and the universe itself was completely against her. When it comes to Tadami, that is all that can be said. She's a character that was used to further the development of other characters, and she does her job. The issue is that there was never room for her to develop further herself. But wait, if it's possible for two people to be fated to meet, then there's still hope for Tadami. There's someone out there who is willing to accept Tadami with open arms. The only issue is that the person who would offer a hand to pull Tadami up with wouldn't be Shimamura. That is the fate of the most unfortunate character in Adachi and Shimamura, Tadami. Alright, now that the content of this video has been discussed, it's around the time where I state my opinions. And all of this is going to be unscripted from this point forward. When talking about Tadami, there's always two sides. The people who hate Tadami and the people who like Tadami. Honestly, I think that it's pretty even. A lot of people hate Tadami for what she did to Adachi indirectly, and a lot of people love Tadami just for her personality and because of the potential that she has as a character. I personally am on the side that loves Tadami. I wish that this series used Tadami more, and I wish that Tadami kind of had the chance to shine in her own light, but she just didn't. That was a privilege that was never granted to her. She never had that choice from the beginning. And you know, I kind of feel bad. While Tadami was steadily progressing towards Shimamura, Shimamura was steadily progressing towards Adachi, all under Tadami's nose, and she didn't know anything about it. Although I rarely ever have anything bad to say about this series, I just absolutely hate when series take this route. I don't like it when there's a character that gets unfair treatment for absolutely no reason. Of course, I get that Tadami had a purpose since the very reason she was introduced, but she never ends up with any sense of closure. She's just kind of thrown out after that, you know. Shimamura takes her accessories off her bag that she was matching with Tadami to symbolize that was the end of their friendship, and nothing will ever happen with them from that point onward. It's really just kind of unbearable, to be honest. That's all that I have to say. Hopefully in volume 12 we get even the slightest bit of information that lets us know how Tadami is doing after all of this, or maybe even a Tadami POV if possible, but I doubt it. Honestly, me, along with many others, just don't think that Tadami will have another appearance in this series. If she does come back, I think it's going to be something like regarding Psyche Saika, something like that. But we never know. Thank you guys for watching this video fully, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Was the Adachi and Shimamura anime adaptation bad? This is a debate that I've been seeing quite a lot recently, so let's talk about it. This question criticizing the Adachi and Shimamura anime isn't new. It's honestly probably been a constant debate since the airing of the series. But where does the question stem from? If you're an anime only, then you probably think that the anime adaptation was perfect. And this is where differing responses from light novel readers come into play. And this is also pretty common as well. For example, I personally believe that the Classroom of Elite anime seasons 1 through 2 were good, and I had little to no complaints for either. However, light novel readers, on the other hand, believed that the adaptation was bad, or in other words, not entirely accurate. And this is more or less a reflection on this debate between Adachi and Shimamura. Now, before we even discuss if the adaptation was bad, we have to first find out what the main complaints about the adaptation even were. First, and probably the most prominent issue, the problem of Hogetsu Shimamura's character. I've said this once, twice, 3, 4, a million times, but the Adachi and Shimamura anime did not do Hogetsu Shimamura much justice. And for that, I'm not directly blaming Tezuka Productions. This is more so an issue with the series in its own right. Shimamura Hogetsu is a character who's constantly had ridiculous amounts of growth over the span of 5 or so years of the Adachi and Shimamura light novel. So Tezuka Productions trying to fit 5 years worth of character growth into a 12-episode anime just isn't going to work. That's why the Shimamura we see in the anime is barely even a minuscule fragment of the Shimamura we see in the light novel. And with Shimamura being the main lead, who's heavily relying on character development throughout the series, without the chance to get that character development, I'm going to be honest, She's just naive and maybe even frankly just a difficult to understand character from an anime only perspective. And one of the main factors that contributes to the overall enjoyment of a series is, well, the leads. And if your leads are painted in a bad light such as this, then well, overall enjoyment will be taken out, which is something that we've already seen based on the backlash of Shimamura's character. I've seen people express genuine hate for Hogetsu Shimamura as a character, and me as a light novel reader, I'm pretty upset by it. In my eyes, Shimamura magnificently captures a ball of creativity, dexterity, and so much more, but when people aren't even getting a fragment of what I've seen, they just don't know that, so they don't know otherwise. Introspection is another thing that the anime fails to grasp, which directly relates back to Hogetsu Shimamura as well. Introspection is the examination or observation of one's own mental and emotional processes. Adachi and Shimamura is a series that relies heavily on introspection. Introspection gives us an idea on why characters are saying what they're saying or why they're doing what they're doing, and once again, Adachi and Shimamura is a series of 5 or so years. Trying to compact 5 or so years worth of introspection and plot advances it's just not possible. And what is the result of this? Awkward plot. Now this was another thing I recently began seeing. Apparently Shimamura and Adachi's interactions made them uncomfortable, and I suppose I can understand a little bit with the lack of introspection, so the conversations may feel stifled to some extent. Taking the introspection out of a series that relies heavily on introspection is not good, because you're also kind of taking away from the story as a whole. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's absolutely no introspection in the Adachi and Shimamura anime, because there certainly is, but it's really just a summary, whereas the more in-depth thoughts are within the light novel. These summaries certainly do help in place of a full-length introspection, but you're still not getting the full experience. With these factors piled on top of each other, it honestly makes the anime sound like it has a bad adaptation. And believe it or not, it genuinely doesn't. Although a lot of us can agree, the adaptation wasn't that bad. With what they were working with, I believe that the studio did great. Although there's some inconsistencies maybe here and there, some of that, it's still fine, because the thing is, the anime was never meant to excel in its own right. The anime was mostly meant to promote the source material, this being the light novel in this case. The anime was made to promote the light novel, and that it does. I went to the light novel after watching the anime because I wanted to learn more. So the anime does its job, and once you read the light novel you can go back and look on it, and it's kind of like a side project for people who enjoy Adachi and Shimamura to go back and watch. So when thinking about it like that, yes, the anime adaptation is okay. It's certainly not bad, it's not the greatest, it's not the worst, it's just okay. Screaming that the anime adaptation is terrible or screaming at the studio who animated the adaptation, those aren't really the right approaches here. I think the best approach for everyone who's indulged in the anime is just to accept it for what it was. Accept it for what it was, and maybe try taking a crack at the light novel. Or if you're someone who doesn't have much time, then maybe take a crack at the manga. The manga, I still wouldn't outright recommend that before the light novel, but you're still getting more than if you were to just indulge in the anime alone. But anyways, that's going to conclude this video. In conclusion, the Adachi and Shimamura anime isn't bad. However, if you have the time, you should read the light novel. Thank you guys for watching if you made it this far. I apologize that this video may be on the shorter side. This is kind of just like a side project video for fun, because I saw this discussion kind of in the Reddit, so I was like, why not put my 2 cents on it? Once again, thank you for making it this far, and I'll see you guys in my next video.
Alright, before we even begin this video, let me just say that this video is probably going to be all over the place. The script for this video was written around the time when SS, or the new chapters of SS, had just released, and it was never really finished. So the me of this past week, I've had to go back, skim through SS, and kind of finish the script. I do at some point just want to sit down and genuinely just reread through the entirety of SS, because my memory has been all over the place. So the script is a couple months old, Not to mention that this is my first video back, so I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. I still think that regardless, it's an enjoyable video, so I hope you guys do enjoy this. Give me just a little bit of time to get back into the swing of things, and I'm sorry that this video is coming out so late. Adachi Atsuka has always been a character in Adachi and Shimamura that has had this sort of mysterious cold aura surrounding her. We know that she's Adachi's mother who actively seems to neglect and even dislikes her daughter for reasons unbeknownst to us. However, that was the extent of her character that we knew. That was until the newest chapters of Adachi and Shimamura SS were released, which contained quite the information dump, which will give us a better idea of Adachi Atsuka's character and developments. Now, before we talk about SS, let's talk a little bit more about Atsuka's character herself. Adachi Atsuka is, without a doubt, an interesting character that I think shapes the format of Adachi and Shimamura sort of differently. Throughout the entirety of Adachi and Shimamura, Atsuka has always been painted in a sort of villainous light. We never really knew anything about her, besides the fact that she hadn't been there all too often for her daughter, and that their connection with each other was barely even holding on. This was enough for a lot of us to immediately write off Atsuka's character, since the vast majority of us believed that at the time, that was the extent of her character, and we wouldn't learn anything more about her. So without a doubt, Atsuka was a disliked character solely because of the fact that we didn't know why she did the things that she did, and we weren't informed that later on we would be getting explanations. What I think is so interesting is the fact that in the newest SS chapters, Iruma decides to dictate the story from the perspective of Atsuka, and it's quite a different experience from what we're normally used to. In the Adachi and Shimamura SS chapter titled "And Then," we follow Atsuka as she's spending the night with the Shimamuras in preparation of sending Adachi and Shimamura off to live together. And I probably should have mentioned that the timeline we're in is quite a ways into the future of Adachi and Shimamura. In short, this whole trip is one big reality check for Atsuka. I think that at this point in the story, Atsuka has just reached a state of pure guilt that's been building up over the years. From the introduction sentence of this chapter to the demeanor in which Atsuka displays herself, it's clear that she is nothing more than a broken woman. And we actually get explanations for why Atsuka is like this. An explanation that gives meaning to the actions that she's done so far. Within this chapter, towards the middle/nearish end, we learn that Atsuka was married. She even had a child, which is, as we know, Adachi. And then she got divorced. But furthering that, we also learn that the marriage was something that Atsuka never wanted. It was a marriage without love. When asked why she even got married, the reason she felt to get married was because she believed that it was expected of her. We can assume that having a child was something that Atsuka never wanted herself either. This marriage that Atsuka forced herself into brought a lot of unhappiness and very likely depression. With nothing left, no husband, no close relatives, only herself and a potentially unwanted daughter, this invoked some sort of self-hate within Atsuka. That self-hate that Atsuka had found would be something that she'd be constantly forced to acknowledge as she watched her daughter grow up and become more and more like herself. And it's primarily for this reason why Atsuka could never bring herself to approach Adachi. It's not that she didn't love her daughter, it's the fact that she didn't love herself. She didn't love who she saw in her daughter and wanted to run away from that. And in fact, did run away from that for almost the entirety of Adachi's childhood. But it's also important to mention that Atsuka doesn't do this with a clean conscience. Even in the main story, as far back as Atsuka's first encounter with Shimamura, she does show symptoms of regret/disappointment. However, she just can't bring herself to take the first step towards her daughter. And as Adachi grows older and becomes more and more akin to her mother, this proves to continuously be difficult for Atsuka. She's stuck in a loop where she's just completely powerless against her daughter, against herself, and against everything. The parts of her daughter that she should have seen first as her mother, she'd only seen for the first time in SS. In SS, she sees Adachi smiling for the first time ever, and she realizes that she knows nothing of her daughter. For a very long time, Atsuka had been lowering Adachi's character to the same standards as her own, believing that they are one and the same, when in reality, this is just not true at all. That is also something that Atsuka herself learns. She never knew the first thing about her daughter and never tried to learn, as she was always under the assumption that her daughter was just a reflection of herself. However, seeing that reflection experience things that you've never experienced shifted Atsuka's interpretation of her daughter. So much so that she believed that her daughter was an entirely different person. And after witnessing how much her daughter had changed without ever even being there for her, Atsuka finally does work up the courage to speak with her daughter, and her words are bittersweet but fitting. "Sakura, I didn't wait for her to respond, for this wasn't a conversation. It was my last will, my testament. I see so much of myself in you." The parting words from a terrible mother to the poor daughter she'd brought to this world. "Which is why I need you to promise," and her heartfelt attempt at doing something motherly for once in her life. "Don't become like me." It's not the "I love you" Adachi would have been happy to hear, and it's not the apology that realistically should have been given. It's a selfish wish from her mother to ensure that her beloved daughter doesn't go down the same route as her mother. This is one of the first times Atsuka has spoken to Adachi, not as a reflection of herself, but as her own person, and I believe that this bittersweet conclusion is better than any other ending Iruma Hitoma could have composed. I believe that Atsuka is a character that fits perfectly into this story. Adachi and Shimamura isn't a series that's lenient enough to give everyone their happy endings. We witnessed this firsthand with Tadami, the girl who had some sort of feelings for Adachi who had to give up on them. And even a future Shimamura that's forcefully stripped away from her Adachi and not reunited until death. There's numerous characters in this story that are forced to succumb to tragic fates, and Atsuka fits in perfectly with that list of characters. And although I don't think Atsuka's reasoning is necessarily justification enough for all the psychological torment that her daughter had to endure for a very long time, but I do love how this was expanded upon, and Atsuka has come face to face with that guilt and has no choice but to accept her mistakes. And regardless, Atsuka is a character that I do feel bad for. Prior to being married, even still, she'd never had the experiences of friends. False information alert, Atsuka actually did have a lot of friends in the past. All's mistaken, forgive me. Someone truthfully. It wouldn't be an overstatement to say that Atsuka is a complete failure. I know it's harsh, but Atsuka's whole existence, her whole presence, her whole life is just a complete failure. And I know that sounds extremely harsh, but there's no other way that it can be put, and I feel so bad for her. Like, at this point in Atsuka's life, she's already fairly old. She's watched her daughter completely grow up. There's not much more that will change, and this is probably how she's going to live out the rest of her days. Of course, she does have a little bit going for her. She has Shimamura Yoshika, Shimamura's mother. Shimamura's mother keeps in contact with Atsuka. She checks up on Atsuka, and I feel like Atsuka herself has learned a lot from Shimamura's mother, which I feel like is at least deserving of Atsuka, right? Having at least one person to be there for her, I feel like that's something that she at least deserves as a person. And that concludes Atsuka's story. Atsuka is just a broken woman who has been broken for a long time. She fell victim to the expectations of her family and perhaps even society as a whole, which caused her to do things that she didn't want to do. And the consequences of doing those things that she didn't want to do resulted in her ultimately living a life of complete contempt. In my eyes, Atsuka's whole character really lets the harsh nature of Adachi and Shimamura sink in. Of course, it's your cute average yuri series between two people coming closer to each other, but with that aside, you have characters like Atsuka on the sidelines who honestly have had the worst of the worst. And it's specifically for characters like Atsuka that are the reason that I love this series. This series is so much more than just being a cute yuri. It's the reason why I always come back to it, and why I most likely always will come back to it. And with that said, that's everything I have to say. Thank you so much for watching this video. It means so much to me. I'll see you guys in my next video. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally made it. Adachi and Shimamura Volume 12 is here. I have been waiting a long time for this one. The first chapter translated released a few days ago. I was in school, I finished my final, and I started reading it then, and I've been working on the video since. But let me just say, I'm pausing all the videos that I'm currently working on to push this out, so we may be waiting a little longer for those, which I apologize for. but I've been waiting a long time for this one. So, similar to the recent Adachi and Shimamura volumes, the first chapter of Volume 12, titled If Adachi Were a Teacher, does take place in an alternate timeline, and in this timeline, Adachi is a teacher and Shimamura is a grade school student in Adachi's class. And for the most part, the highlight of this chapter is child Shimamura. We already knew what Shimamura was like as a child from Volume 11, but this kind of adds on to what we know. Shimamura is energetic, and according to Adachi, she's the very image of innocence. She has a lot of friends, which we knew. Once again, she acts awfully silly, which isn't that surprising given that she's a child. But something that kind of stands out throughout this chapter is Shimamura's fixation towards Adachi. Ever since Adachi began teaching Shimamura's class, Shimamura has always initiated conversation with her, tried to talk to her, just as a whole has tried to be together with Adachi, and this leads to Shimamura asking Adachi out on a date. I thought that this was pretty strange at first too, since they have a grade schooler and teacher relationship at this time. So just to let you guys know, Adachi stays very professional throughout all of this. So Adachi agrees to the date, believing that it's just Shimamura being Shimamura with her silly games. However, once again, since this is with a student, Adachi restricts them to the school premises. After finding a spot and speaking for a little while, Adachi goes to ask Shimamura out of curiosity why she chose to ask her out on a date, and Shimamura, grade school Shimamura, confesses her love for Adachi in response. So Adachi, being confused and generally trying to keep this as professional and as appropriate as possible, states that she loves all her students as a response to Shimamura's confession. Unsatisfied by Adachi's response, Shimamura tells Adachi that that's not the type of love that she means, resulting in Adachi saying that she does love Shimamura in an attempt to satisfy her. And following this, we also get some really interesting information about the Adachi of this timeline that I meant to go over at some point in this video. And that's actually about her relationship with her mother. Now, we know that our Adachi, the Adachi that we usually see within this series, has a not so good relationship with her mother Atsuka. However, this Adachi, this alternate timeline Adachi, does have a good relationship with her mother, and the two actually consistently talk, and there's not really any animosity from either party. And what's interesting about this is, since this is an alternate timeline, it only makes sense that events in this timeline will also be different from the events in our main timeline. And a defining event that shapes our usual Adachi's character is the time when Adachi was a child and her parents brought her to the zoo. When at the zoo, Adachi saw a stuffed animal that caught her eye. However, Adachi was too scared to ask for it, beginning the trend of Adachi being too afraid to reach out to people. It's not an overstatement to say that this one event created the Adachi that we know and love today. This chapter was also animated in the manga. It might have been in the anime, not too sure on that. I do know that the manga has animated this chapter, and I will be having that on screen. However, in Volume 12, these events are different. While Adachi is at the zoo, she's still too scared to ask her parents for the stuffed animal. However, this time, Atsuka realized what Adachi wanted and bought it for her, effectively changing the entire course of Adachi's life. And the cherry on top is that Adachi, who's monologuing all these events, also proposes a question. She wonders how different her life would have been had her mother not brought her that stuffed animal, and, well, as we know, not only is her entire life different, but even Adachi as a whole is completely different. This is an Adachi that never suffered from social anxiety. This is an Adachi who never met Shimamura growing up, and all of this ties back to that exact event in Adachi's life that changes all of this, and I found this to be incredibly interesting. Following this, we get something even more interesting that I actually really want to talk about. After hearing a mysterious laugh from behind her, Adachi looks up, only to be greeted by a cattail swaying back and forth behind Shimamura. And this cattail didn't belong to a cat, it actually belonged to a girl. Can you guys guess who this is? I'm sure you can. If you hadn't, this is Yashiro. Yashiro was in the midst of checking the connection between Adachi and Shimamura in this timeline to see if they've met or not, and after establishing the connection, she honestly just leaves. It's not that I necessarily want to focus on. I want to focus on Adachi's perspective on Yashiro, because this is the first time that Adachi sees Yashiro in this timeline. And Adachi draws considerable amounts of connections between Kid Shimamura and Yashiro, which generally isn't too surprising since Shimamura herself has done this same thing, stating that when she was a child, she was a lot similar to Yashiro. However, Adachi also says that their personalities match in some ways. Now, throughout the series, there's been considerable amount of comparison between Shimamura and Yashiro, sometimes coming from Shimamura herself, and now we're hearing it from Adachi too in a completely different timeline. So at this point, I'm starting to believe that there is a additional connection between Shimamura and Yashiro that we don't know. Now, I'm not going to get into this too much because now I have a new video idea, but let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that there is another connection between Shimamura and Yashiro aside from the promise that we see in the Blu-ray discs? I feel like Iruma Hitoma wouldn't constantly give us these little comparisons throughout this series for no reason. Anywho, since we've already kind of dug into the meat and potatoes of this volume, we can kind of fast forward to the end of this volume since we're already close. Adachi makes a promise that when Shimamura is old enough they can get married. The chapter ends with Shimamura and Adachi, 12 years later, with an older Shimamura who has freshly graduated high school who still is fully intent on getting married to Adachi, thus concluding the chapter, and we can assume that they got married afterwards. This chapter was honestly really interesting. I think it brought some things to the surface that may or may not be worth discussing, and it's also interesting seeing how such a small event can change the course of these characters' lives. Not even really these characters, how such a small event could change all of our lives. I think this was an interesting first chapter, but I've seen a lot of people say that they don't really like these time skip chapters, or these alternate timeline chapters, which completely makes sense. People want to see our characters, I want to see our characters, and I'm sure we're hopefully going to get a lot of that. There's also an additional part of this chapter. The next part focuses on Hino and Nagafuji, and since honestly, I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm not really too invested in this couple, and I want to get this video out as soon as possible. We're going to skim through. Sorry, my Hino and Nagafuji enjoyers. If you guys really want me to cover everything about Hino and Nagafuji, let me know. I can try to get more invested into them, but I personally just haven't found them to be too interesting. So basically, Nagafuji goes over to Hino's house, the usual, but this time she wants to discuss what-if questions, since those are apparently popular in the world as of now. This leads to Hino asking, what if Nagafuji never met Hino? And to this, Nagafuji simply says that she'd go and look for Hino. This part ends with Hino coming to the realization that if Nagafuji was never there, she'd probably be sinking into the earth ready to vanish, leading the two to mutually express how lucky they are to have never needed to look for each other. Another satisfying ending, and it makes me want to ask a question. I asked the same question a year ago, I believe, but more in the form of a statement. Do you guys think it's possible that a Yashiro-like entity, maybe a brethren, or genuinely some other life form similar to Yashiro, could be out there helping all the Hinos and Nagafujis to find each other throughout these timelines? Let me know what you guys think on that, because I'm honestly not sure. That's going to conclude my first video back. In Adachi and Shimamura video, I'm probably never going to go this long without posting an Adachi and Shimamura video again. I love this series, and I'm kind of ready to get back into YouTube, get back into posting, and I have a lot of free time now, so that's what I'm going to be doing. Expect more videos from me very soon. Like I said earlier, I kind of paused those videos I was working on to push this out so I can talk about it while it's still relevant, I guess we'll say. But with that said, that's going to end this video. Thank you so much if you guys made it this far, and I'll see you all in my next one. I did a poll 2 days ago asking what video you guys wanted to see next, and Adachi and Shimamura won by a pretty fair margin, which I'm glad to see because I've been planning some Adachi and Shimamura videos for a while now. Just wanted to make sure you guys wanted to still see them from me. I've delved into Adachi, I've delved into Shimamura, I've delved into Yashiro, I've delved into Tatami, I've delved into Atsuka, so now this leaves us with very few options left regarding characters. The last remaining characters are really Hino, Nagafuji, Shimamura Yoshika, Poncho, and that's really it. I know that there's some more characters like Shimamura's sister Sho and a few mystery characters, however, we don't really have enough information on them for me to make a full delving into video about. By the way, I wanted to say really quickly, isn't it so hilarious how after all these years, we still have no idea what the name of Shimamura's sister actually is. Yashiro calls her Sho, but according to Shimamura, that's nowhere near close to what her actual name is. And this makes it 10 times funnier because we didn't even find out that Sho wasn't her name until volume 10. So for the last 10 volumes, since she's been introduced, we've been referring to her as a false name. I don't know, I'm really curious on where that'll go. But this is already going to be a long video, we don't have time to get distracted. Now, since I've already delved into the majority of the highlighted characters in this series, I wanted to try something new this time. And rather than delving into a specific, singular character, I thought about delving into multiple characters and the complexities along with the effects that said characters have on each other. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but bear with me for a second. For example, and also what this video is actually going to be about, is Adachi and Shimamura's relationship. I'm going to delve into how this relationship has changed over the years right alongside our beloved characters, because from the point where these two started dating to where they are now, there has been considerable growth as people and as partners. So I can guarantee that this is going to be a longer video. The script for this video is 6 pages long, so I guess get your snacks, and let's talk about some Adachi and Shimamura. Adachi and Shimamura begin dating in Volume 6, Chapter 5, titled Flight. And before we begin discussing anything, I think it's more than important to discuss the attitudes and perspectives that the characters have going into this relationship, so we can see how they change later on. Going into this relationship, Adachi knows what she wants from Shimamura before they even begin dating. Adachi wants Shimamura to only look at her. She wants a special relationship with Shimamura that binds them together. In essence, Adachi really wants the two of them to belong to each other with very minimal outside interaction. This has always been Adachi's goal per se. Adachi makes it very clear that she loves Shimamura. She's 100% set on these feelings. She believes in these feelings. She doesn't need to give them any second thoughts, so when she confesses, that's just that. However, Shimamura on the other hand is quite literally the antithesis of everything that Adachi is in this moment. Shimamura questions. She wonders what two girls would even look like going out. She wonders if she'd truly be able to stand by Adachi no matter what. She tries to rationalize her decision, come to some sort of conclusion, and ultimately Shimamura does, and ends up choosing to go out with Adachi. Shimamura is very uncertain about a lot of things here. For one, at this point, Shimamura is just beginning to love Adachi. It is even stated by her in Volume 10, Chapter 4, titled The Sakura's Arc, that she only started loving Adachi after Adachi had confessed to her. So, Shimamura is going into this without any strong motives or desires. She doesn't know what she wants from Adachi yet. Shimamura isn't necessarily hoping to gain anything from Adachi. She's in a sense just testing the waters and seeing where all of this goes. At this point, Shimamura probably isn't even aware of the fact. No, scratch that, she most likely is not aware of the fact that she even loves Adachi. With that said, as we can see, there is a clear differ in perspectives from the get-go. They are not on the same wavelength. And now that we kind of have a reference point for all of this, let's look at how they change and their relationships shift from volume to volume. The first chapter that really begins showing any forms of change between this relationship and our characters is none other than Volume 7, Chapter 4, titled Momentary Peace is All I Need. In the prior confession, Shimamura left most of the thinking regarding what should change in their relationship up to her future self, and, well, this is her future self now, so she needs to figure out what exactly should change. A common theme throughout this whole entire chapter and going forward in the story involving Shimamura is change. Shimamura believes that it'd be strange for nothing to change when transitioning between friends to a relationship, which is already something that we can really note down. Shimamura is trying to, in a sense, abide by Adachi's wishes and turn the relationship into something unique and meaningful. Hence the reason why Shimamura also attempts to call Adachi by her first name in this chapter, which doesn't really work out. But this is still a huge starting point for Shimamura, and we will see more of this going forward. This will be pretty important later on. Continuing a little deeper into this chapter, we also see something that will resurface time and time again throughout this relationship and has already been resurfacing time and time again, and that is none other than Adachi's supreme jealousy. In case you guys thought it got better when the two began dating, it hadn't. If anything, it's quite worse now. As I kind of hinted at and stated before, Adachi wants a relationship with little to no outside interaction. Anytime Shimamura interacts with someone else besides her, Adachi just kind of shuts down. And Lord forbid that it be someone that Adachi hasn't met yet. Adachi in this chapter really begins to showcase her quote-unquote hidden claws, as stated by Shimamura, while also simultaneously accusing Shimamura of cheating and bashing her unintentionally. As even stated by Shimamura herself, Adachi's criteria for what is considered cheating is harsh. She is essentially lashing out at Shimamura because Shimamura interacted with her friends. Adachi in all honesty wants Shimamura entirely to herself, which in turn causes mental turmoil for her partner, who bears the burden of being that person who is tied down. Even deeper into this chapter, Adachi once again does one of her usual tirades. She eavesdrops on Shimamura's conversation with Tadami over the phone, which I shouldn't even have to tell you why this is necessarily wrong. As we can see, Adachi doesn't really have a clear-cut concept of boundaries for their relationship, and she's managed to show that multiple times already in the span of one chapter. And this is once again almost like a stab directly in the chest for Shimamura, as she has to yet again avoid her friends in order to appease Adachi. This causes Shimamura to really think carefully about what's happened thus far, and she comes to the conclusion that this is just something that she's going to have to get over in order to date Adachi. And she needs to act accordingly in order to properly handle and deal with Adachi's antics. And another thing that I wanted to add to all of this before we end this chapter and move on to the next is Shimamura's last monologue here at the end of this chapter. Shimamura says, quote unquote, "Never before had anyone outside of my family told me that they loved me this many times. Not just that, there is a possibility that no one ever would. Eventually, there would come a day when I found meaning in that person being Adachi. I was sure of it. I'd start thinking of our time together, the moments when we got to touch one another, as being something precious." Now, if you guys have noticed, this is not only a new sentiment for the Shimamura that is dating Adachi, but this is a new sentiment for Shimamura in general. Shimamura, only one volume after she begins dating Adachi, believes that one day she will find meaning in her lover being Adachi. It's at this point where Shimamura's love, in my opinion, really begins showing. Despite not being on the same wavelength as Adachi, and even being put through ordeals that force her to view herself differently because of Adachi and her antics, she still believes that a day will come when she finds value in her interactions with Adachi. This is a very important monologue for Shimamura because this is signaling change. We haven't seen Shimamura think like this before. So since we've dissected this chapter, let's do a quick recap and note some important changes / effects. For starters, what Adachi meant by wanting Shimamura to look only at her and no one else during her confession becomes abundantly clear. She wants Shimamura to choose her over everyone always, as we see when Adachi gets mad at Shimamura for talking to her friends or getting pouty when eavesdropping on Shimamura. And in turn, this generates a lot of turmoil within Shimamura, ultimately leading Shimamura to just concluding that she's gonna have to just get over this and learn how to navigate Adachi better. For Shimamura's side, Shimamura begins believing that she will find meaning in her relationship with Adachi, which in a sense is kind of parallel from how she was during Adachi's confession. During the confession, she wasn't necessarily hoping to gain anything, nor was she really going in with any specific strong feelings. But now she is putting her all into this relationship essentially, and she even begins believing that something will come from her doing so. The last chapter of Volume 7 that I want to quickly take a look at is Chapter 5, titled Words Most Mundane. At the very beginning of this chapter, we are greeted by an Adachi contemplating on whether or not her desires and what she wants from Shimamura are reasonable to ask for. As we hopefully all know now, Adachi only wants Shimamura to look at her. However, here, she is starting to question if that's something that she can really ask of Shimamura. This is pretty huge for Adachi and the relationship as a whole, because whether Adachi realized it or not, her jealousy had been weighing on them. This is the exact same jealousy that caused them to almost have a complete falling out. And two, this is just really good for Adachi herself. Adachi as a character is someone who thinks time and time again about Shimamura, all day, every day about Shimamura. However, a lot of the time, she is susceptible to not necessarily thinking about Shimamura's feelings or how Shimamura will feel about certain things. So her starting this chapter thinking about how her desires may make Shimamura feel is once again a huge starting point for Adachi, and this also signals growth for Adachi. Now let's go ahead and jump to the next volume, which will be volume 8. And all throughout this volume, Adachi and Shimamura's relationship goes through all kinds of changes. However, similarly to before, I will only be focusing on the very important bits. If you really want to see how this relationship changes every step of the way, then honestly I would highly recommend for you to just read the series yourself. Even with me explaining all the very important bits, even some of these small bits contribute too, but if I were to put all of that into one video, then this video would be way too long. But first, we are going to start off with Volume 8, Chapter 1, titled Our First Journey 1. As the name implies, Shimamura and Adachi go on a journey. Well, not really a journey, more so a class trip to the city of Kitakyushu. This is a really important chapter because, well, for one, the two are going somewhere different together, somewhere unfamiliar where the only thing they will really have is each other. And two, this is their last school trip in high school, and both of them, or for the most part Shimamura, are determined to make this last trip good. Throughout this trip, we see different parts of Adachi and Shimamura. We have really cute bonding moments, some even erotic moments, sweet moments, funny moments. It's in a way kind of the ultimate Adachi and Shimamura arc, but we're not here to talk about this arc. We're here to talk about the developments and effects that happen within their relationship during this arc. The first big change in perspective on their relationship that I want to talk about is Shimamura's acceptance of their relationship. Prior to all of this, as far back as the initial confession, Shimamura struggled with juggling the idea of two girls dating. Even though she ultimately accepted that, it was still something that she actively tried to hide from others. Whenever Adachi went to state that they were dating in a public environment, Shimamura would cut her off. Shimamura made an effort to make sure that this was hidden. In chapter 8, page 162, Shimamura breaks through this almost invisible wall that she's been holding up and accepts that Adachi is her girlfriend. She is close with Adachi. There's no more beating around the bush trying to deny the obvious. This is the fact of the matter that she has been, in a way, neglecting, or rather struggling to accept. Shimamura in this chapter also makes up her mind to live her life similarly to the way that Adachi does, and be more open about her feelings, and this leads Shimamura to heartfully stating that she is glad that she ended up meeting Adachi. Now, in this chapter, there's a lot of other subtle bonding moments, but not any extreme moments that really elevate the two's relationship to new heights, so we will move on to the next chapter, but before that, I want to talk about Shimamura's monologue at the end of this chapter too. In this monologue, Shimamura states that even if her group of 5 weren't able to fully get along, she would always have Adachi. Would Adachi be enough though? She just simply isn't able to answer that right now. Now, this monologue is important because Shimamura is starting to view Adachi as an entity that will always be there. She's starting to get more accustomed to Adachi, and although she can't tell us if Adachi's presence will be enough to permanently satisfy her, she is at least considering it. She is gradually finding meaning in Adachi being there, and it seems like with every chapter that passes, Shimamura opens herself more and more to Adachi. Like we stated before, Shimamura said that she would just have to learn how to handle and accept Adachi, and in this chapter we see that she's starting to do just that. In Our First Journey 2, which is of course a continuation of Our First Journey 1, a lot happens in this chapter. The chapter starts off pretty importantly. Pancho has a one-on-one conversation with Shimamura, and in this conversation, Pancho is, for the most part, heavily focused on the relationship between two girls. She's interested in it. Or more specifically, as the conversation later shifts, the relationship between Adachi and Shimamura. Now, this conversation has no fixed topic. They juggle back and forth from one thing to another. So I'm just going to tell you guys the impact that this conversation has on Shimamura and her relationship. This interaction makes Shimamura realize that once again, she really does like Adachi. The next and probably biggest thing we will have discussed in all of today's video is the instance that happens right after this. While on the bus heading to their next location, the two, along with their class, realize that their next location is covered in a dense and thick fog. And after getting distracted for just a few moments, Shimamura finds herself lost in said fog. Now, after realizing that she is lost, Shimamura makes a very interesting statement that I can't help but think has been building in her mind for a while. She questions if this is what her world would be like without Adachi. Just an endless stream of fog with nothing in sight, completely and entirely aimless, desolate, pointless even. And once Shimamura meets up with Adachi and finds her, it's also revealed to us that Adachi feels the same way. While for the most part throughout the entirety of this series, the two have been out of wavelength, and even after this they still go back to being out of wavelength, I feel like this is one of the rare instances where the two feel the exact same thing in the exact same moment. Another thing we see shortly after that was explored earlier is Adachi's willingness to begin taking Shimamura's feelings more into account. Adachi actually puts this into practice, which earns her even a questioning response from Shimamura, as she usually isn't one to do that. This chapter ends with Shimamura continuing the trend of pushing forth her true feelings towards Adachi, and even making plans with Adachi for the future. The future in Adachi and Shimamura is talked about a lot, but it's always talked about from the perspective of uncertainty. It's always uncertain whether this will happen, or whether that will happen, or if anything will happen, or what should happen. But instead, for what feels like the first time, these characters are looking ahead at the future, happily. 10 years down the line, forging something to strive towards together. Our first journey is an important chapter because not only does it cause our two characters to have immense personal growth, but they also, for the first time in their relationship, match each other's feelings entirely. This is truly the point where the relationship between Adachi and Shimamura shifts into something completely more serious than whatever it was before. It's even here where I feel like the series shifts, because after this arc, both characters walk away so much more mature and so much more well versed about one another than when they first began dating, or even the arc prior to this. Going forward to the next volume, Volume 9, we don't actually have much to cover, given that for the most part, Volume 9 is split between Adachi and Shimamura chapters and Hino and Nagafuji chapters. But there is still a chapter that I want to take a look at, and that is none other than Volume 9, Chapter 4, titled Tempest Sakura Christmas Scrolls. And in this chapter, something extremely glaring is finally brought to the attention of Shimamura, and that's how, in Adachi's eyes, Shimamura comes off as quite untrustworthy. The root cause for this issue lies in Shimamura's lack of interest in other people. Although she has grown to love Adachi, that doesn't necessarily erase the fact that this lack of interest in a way has become her personality to a certain degree. It's a habit that she's built up, and in turn, Adachi does feel like she may be indifferent when compared to other people in Shimamura's eyes, which we actually do see in this chapter. And this isn't something that's new. We see this all the time whenever we get Adachi chapters. She's always wondering if Shimamura really has feelings for her, or if Shimamura is actually interested in her. A part of Adachi does not trust Shimamura, and that's going to be a given since Shimamura often struggles to bear herself to Adachi. However, in Volume 9, Shimamura addresses this issue instead of running away from it or stalling it out for as long as possible like she normally would have before. Shimamura looks at Adachi and professes her love, which, if you know, is not a common thing for Shimamura to do, so this is fairly big. She professes her love and tells Adachi that if she can't convey her love properly, then she has some work to do. A very, very big change in maturity from Shimamura. Not only is she able to pinpoint that there is an issue here, she communicates to Adachi that she is going to work on fixing this problem going forth. And after this, Shimamura adds more to her prior quote that I'm just going to recite to you guys, because it's huge. Shimamura states, quote unquote, "I used to have a lot of friends in the past who I barely meet anymore, and yet my life still continues. If it ever did come down to it, I get a feeling like the same thing would happen with our relationship too. That is why I need to do my best not to lose you. To suppress the part of myself that, yes, finds everything bothersome. Bothersome. Exactly. Questions like, what do I think about you? How do I want us to be? I can't just ignore them and pretend like they don't matter. Once it becomes a habit, you don't really tend to notice when things start fading away." This quote showcases a different side of Shimamura.
Shimamura is usually a character that doesn't like talking about herself or facing problems head on. She usually stalls things out until it becomes something that she can no longer ignore. But this quote is literally the opposite of everything that Shimamura ever was. Shimamura comes out and says that she needs to try her best not to lose Adachi, and in order to do that, she needs to get rid of this part of herself that has become so accustomed to people coming and going. Not only does Shimamura address the issue, but she also addresses exactly what needs to be changed. This is really where the lessons learned from the prior chapters come into play, like in the last section where we talk about how Shimamura is making it a goal of hers to be more open about her feelings, similarly to how Adachi is. This chapter ends with another I love you from Shimamura. This chapter was really big for Shimamura because now that she knows of this issue that has been, in a way, plaguing their relationship, along with Adachi's state of mind, she now has another goal to work towards and fix. Very short chapter, but all the same with very strong takeaways. Heading into Volume 10, all of the prior events really come back around in full swing. In Volume 10, Chapter 4, titled The Sakura's Arc, Shimamura acknowledges that in the past, Adachi struggled to convey her true intentions. However, once Shimamura learned how to take a step back and really just look at the situation, she was more often than not able to understand Adachi now. And now I have a question for you guys. Does this sound familiar? Well, it should, because we talked about this earlier. For Shimamura to stay with Adachi, she'd have no choice but to learn how to navigate and handle Adachi better. And right here, we can see that she's having success in that. Shimamura took a step back and now she was able to understand Adachi. The next time we see Shimamura talk to Tadami in this chapter, it's more of the same thing. Before anything, Shimamura takes Adachi's feelings into consideration, and beyond that, comes out and merrily tells Tadami about her relationship instead of hiding it. Does this sound familiar? We also talked about this too. Shimamura has accepted her relationship with Adachi. She was no longer viewing the relationship as something to hide, but instead as something to accept, similarly to how Adachi does it, just like she said that she would try to start doing. And a bit later in this chapter, instead of viewing Adachi's jealousy as something tying her down and restraining her, she instead deals with it head on and tries to talk Adachi through her perspective. Volume 10, in my opinion, is one of the ultimate volumes because the confession, Shimamura and Adachi's first journey, all the gained experiences really reflected in this volume. You can really see how Shimamura has been saving all of her experiences with Adachi and learning and trying to find meaning along with growth. The exact same can be said for Adachi. Adachi has learned how to be more trusting of Shimamura, is how we can put it. In Volume 10, Chapter 8, Shimamura comes to a conclusion of sorts. She finally states that she does not believe that anyone else could fulfill the role of Adachi in her life. Adachi at this point has become a staple in Shimamura's life. No longer was Shimamura waiting to find meaning in her time spent with Adachi. She has found meaning in all their encounters, and could even thoroughly say that she was happy to have met Adachi. Adachi is similar to a boat in Shimamura's eyes, a boat that carries her to places that she never thought she'd be able to reach in her life. Despite the good and the bad that Adachi had brought into Shimamura's life, regardless, she had always been there standing by Shimamura's side. And the final volume, Volume 11, I know that Volume 12 is out, but not all of it is translated, so I cannot talk about it, unfortunately. And Volume 11, for the most part, there's not that many chapters in our timeline with the characters that we've grown accustomed to. It's a lot in different timelines or a lot about backstory. So that really does limit how much information is in this chapter, but regardless. In Volume 11, Chapter 6, Shimamura says that Adachi is all that she needs. This is important because earlier, Shimamura questioned if Adachi was all that she needed, so seeing how she is able to now come out with this clear-cut answer without having to ponder on it shows a lot of growth. And following this, near the end of this chapter, Shimamura even also finds something that she wants from Adachi now, which, if you guys forgot, had been a fluctuating idea in Shimamura's mind. When the two began dating, Shimamura entered this relationship not really wanting anything from Adachi, but as the two grew closer, Shimamura found something that she wanted, something that only Adachi could offer her. And that turned out to just be her, to
just be Adachi. What Shimamura ended up wanting from Adachi was for Adachi to be her usual quirky and awkward self, and I find this to be beautiful. What Shimamura wanted from Adachi but hadn't realized was always right in front of her the whole time. It's only now that she was able to completely accept that and put it into words and be cognizant of it. The relationship between Adachi and Shimamura starts out rocky for both parties. On one side of the coin, one of them is unable to control their yearn, their urge for something special, something unique, that often comes out in the form of bursts of jealousy, which in turn creates all sorts of mental obstacles for their partner who is under the umbrella of these reigning feelings. While on the other side of the coin, one of them struggles to even find meaning in their relationship to begin with, and ultimately is just going along with it to respect their partner's feelings that they've been brave enough to push forth. However, through something as simple as time and communication, these two characters are able to grow and completely break through these initial obstacles. Adachi begins realizing that although Shimamura is her lover, Shimamura is a person. Although Shimamura is known for her high tolerance, Adachi learns that there is only so much that she can ask her for, while for Shimamura, her form of learning is kind of different. Shimamura instead takes her time to figure out her feelings about Adachi and their relationship. Figure out what she wants from Adachi, if she ultimately will still want to be with Adachi in the future, and how to even contain Adachi's supreme jealousy, acceptance of their relationship, and through Shimamura's determination and belief that she will find meaning in her lover being Adachi, she does. She comes to the conclusion that she loves Adachi and nobody can replace her Adachi. She realizes that while everyone else in her life has come and gone, Adachi has been completely different. Adachi has always stayed with her, even when their relationship was on the brink of destruction, ultimately just leading Shimamura to the belief that Adachi is now all that she needs in her life. Looking at this story from the outside in, it becomes clear that this is a story about maturing. That is what Adachi and Shimamura is about. At the end of the day, these are two characters who both lack a lot. Adachi lacks a lot of early childhood experiences and a lot of love, while Shimamura has a general lack of interest in people and things, and by extension, even the world around her. However, these flaws, these things that these characters lack, that doesn't stop the two from finding what they're missing in one another. Which is why I think that this story and this whole series is so beautiful in every aspect. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to conclude this video. While we talked about all of the current developments that Adachi and Shimamura's relationship has had, there is still much. Before this video even begins, if you do find yourself enjoying this video at any point, please do consider subscribing and leaving a like. My goal by the end of this year is 10,000 subscribers, and I'm putting in a lot of effort to make that goal a reality. With that being said, please enjoy this video. Alright, hi guys. It's Whadasha. And as you guys can see, we're returning. It's been a while since I've reviewed some of the Adachi and Shimamura manga chapters. I know I missed the confession, I know I missed some stuff like that, and it's not like I didn't have a video on those. I had a video on the confession, but of course that video got corrupted. Noticing a trend here with some of my videos. But I figured now is probably one of the best times to start reviewing the manga because we're getting dangerously close to our first journey, and by no means do I want to miss that, because that is, it's obligated of me to talk about that pretty much. And also because I really just like the World's Most Mundane chapter. This is World's Most Mundane 1, so I'm guessing that there's going to be a World's Most Mundane 2 and whatnot. But anyways, I'm really excited. I've been waiting a while for this, so let's just start reading. Okay, so we have, lately I've been having doubts, Adachi perspective starting. I'm starting to question if she actually wants me to watch over her, if only just a bit. I want her to smile at me, I want her to be kind to me. Well, she is kind to me, save for those stern expressions she puts on from time to time. Is there something more important than me that requires your attention? I know that this is the first page and I don't want to go on a tirade, but I think that this is really interesting the way that they did this, because in the light novel, rather than Adachi making it seem like she's suspicious of Shimamura, the light novel instead makes it seem like Adachi is questioning her previous desires from Shimamura. Because in the light novel, we see that Adachi thinks that she's asking too much of Shimamura. She's wondering if she's really able to ask that much of Shimamura. So yeah, my bad that I kind of went on a tirade there this early. I just thought that was really interesting because it adds like a completely different meaning to this scene. in my opinion at least. Okay, and then we have the after all, I am your number one. After all, I am your girlfriend. I am your girlfriend. Yeah, it's always a joy seeing Adachi's expressions in this series, this manga. I have so little memory of my grade school field trips that I don't even remember where we went, but this time it'll be different because I'll be right there with her. How nice, a trip with Shimamura. One day we'll go somewhere, just the two of us. Subtle foreshadowing. Oh my god, look at Shimamura's expression. She's so like, oh my god. Shimamura. Okonomiyaki again, still 6 more to go before she gets to make our lunches. Toss it? Of course I won't, there's no way. I'd never throw out something you cooked for me. I kid, but now I'm wondering if that's actually how she feels. Not long ago, she pressed those same lips against my forehead and promised they were just for me. And for a moment, that angle and sensation almost made me feel like I was being enveloped by her, like I was completely hers. I really want her to do that again. And then here's where we kind of get into what this chapter is about. Adachi's yearn for that feeling that Shimamura previously gave her, that feeling of being encapsulated by Shimamura. What's up? Oh, not a thing. Let's see. Fine. Wait, was this in... I think that scene was that in the light novel? Okay, apparently it is. Don't lose control of yourself. You wouldn't want a repeat of that night, would you? No, that'd be awful. I actually like how they also incorporate this scene right after my video on Adachi's breakdown, and how I mentioned that after that incident, Adachi does make more of a conscious effort to keep herself in check. Kinda wish they released this earlier, could have used that as reference for that video. I know I was wrong, I know I was at fault for it, but I just want to know, who in the world was that girl? Probably the same person she was talking to on the phone. Not surprising, why wouldn't she have friends, in a life outside of our relationship? It's just, all those different sides scare me. How can I love every aspect of her when I don't even know what that means? If that's the case, I need to spare no effort in knowing the unknown. That's my goal in life, to learn everything about her. But how? Cling to her too much, and she'll end up hating me. Yes, but I want to be with her. The only way to make your dream come true is to face those problems head on. To bridge every possible gap you can. What's up? Were you sleeping? Wow, how'd you tell? I think I'm getting better and better at pinning her down. Wait, what? Next suitor day. Next suitor day, I was wondering, next suitor day, if you wanted to go on a date. A debate on suitor day? No, Shimamura's a troll. A debate on suitor day? Sorry, just take out the EB. How polite. Sure thing, next Saturday, right? Yeah. Why not ask me at school tomorrow? I just called as soon as it came to mind. Oh, I see. A fine reason. Is it? Alright, where do you want to go? Where do I want to go? Somewhere I'm likely to receive a forehead kiss, but just where would that be? Just where? Oh my god! Just where? I really like that. I was also waiting on seeing this scene right here because similarly in the light novel, Adachi literally just zones out. Like, her controller literally just disconnects, and while Shimamura's talking, she's just staring into space. Actually, let me see if I can show you guys. Look, literally right here. So then, where would you like to go? Where? What place was it that would lead to her kissing me on the forehead again? Where? Hey, Adachi, where are you staring? Where? Can you hear me? Hello? Where? She completely just zones out. I like how they did the 1,000-yard stare too. That's really funny. Where? Does such a place actually exist? Gosh, I don't think I've thought this hard about something in my life. At the very least, I could be thankful that she's taller than me. Wait, is she? No, I'm the taller one here. Huh? Doesn't feel like it at all. Huh? Why not just skip the plans and ask her directly? I don't know, wouldn't that be a little weird? So, not like I'm normal to begin with. No, all that tells me is that I need to fix myself. But if that's off the table, then I guess it's back to brainstorming date ideas. I'll just call her and see how it goes. Shimamura decides to troll here. Shimamura does a little trolling. Hey, good evening. Why is it that every time I pick up the phone, it's you on the other end? Really? That's only because I want to hear your voice day in and day out. Okay, they kind of shorten that a little bit. Well, actually, it was a kind of a short statement to begin with. Shimamura says, I feel like I'm only really talking on the phone with you these days to Adachi. So she becomes a little more cognizant of how often she's spending time with Adachi, which I think is a really nice detail to put in. No big deal. So what is it today? Oh, I just wanted to ask you a question. Oh, what would that be? Can is head come again? Mumble, mumble, mumble. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Can you? Wait. Okay. Wait. So you want me to kiss you on the forehead? Yes. You could have just asked. I would have been happy to do that whenever. Oh my god. Actually, know what? Don't want to do it anymore. Oh my gosh. Shimamura, that's quite a smile. Because I'll be counting on you to make it happen. If I could, I wouldn't be here asking you. You got this. Oh, come on. Don't do everything in my power to make it happen. I'll try my best to respond to her kindness in turn, no matter what form it may take. Maybe I could put whipped cream on my forehead if I was an idiot. That's gonna come back later, by the way, guys. Alright, of course, that's the end of this chapter. I have a few things I want to state. For one, I always really look forward to reading these Adachi and Shimamura manga chapters. Despite seeing everything in the light novel, I think that the manga adaptation is really good. It adds so much emotion to these characters that the light novel just can't capture. And that's not because the light novel is bad, no. The light novel is amazing. There's just so much you can do when you don't have the expressions of the light novel, or the expressions of the manga. Like, for example, when I was reading this scene, Shimamura's smile right here, that kind of gives us a glimpse into what Adachi sees on the regular. That is something that we just don't really see all too often. So I feel like this scene itself it shows us more about Shimamura, more about what Adachi sees in Shimamura, if that makes sense. I also like the sleek little references that they throw in here and there, like the 1,000-yard stare right here. You see, we have school, work, and it's very accurate to what actually happens in the series, and they throw their own little spin on it. I think that the manga does a really good job with things like this. With that said, I think we're gonna conclude the video here. There's not much to talk about in the World's Most Mundane chapters. The World's Most Mundane chapters are more so just some chill chapters that build up some anticipation for the school trip, which we're going to see very soon. This is not the end of World's Most Mundane. This is just the first chapter, so I'm going to make a video on the follow-up World's Most Mundane chapters, and it's going to be a blast. It's going to be great. If you guys are excited for the Adachi and Shimamura manga review returning, please be sure to like and subscribe. You know, I really have fun reviewing these chapters, and I think a lot of you guys enjoy hearing me talk about them, I hope. But with that said, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Hi guys. Before we get into this super interesting video, I have two very quick announcements for you all. Number one, in case you guys didn't know, I do have a Discord server. In this Discord server, I give exclusive sneaks to my next videos, and pretty soon I'm going to be letting you guys pick what videos I cover next. But beyond just my content, there are just a lot of cool people in here. It's a super friendly place, everyone is really nice to talk to, and above all, everyone loves Yuri. It's a good place to connect with other people who like Yuri. Don't tell anyone, but sometimes I stalk you guys and steal your Yuri recommendations, so yeah. And number two, a lot of you guys for a while have been asking me if there are ways for you to further support me besides YouTube, and for a while I haven't really had anything like that, but not too long ago I decided to make a Ko-fi where you guys can donate tidbits to me if you want to. Now that's really optional, that's more so for I guess, like, what would you even call that? Just for people who have been interested in that. All donations go straight to me, and if you do, it will be very much appreciated. Now, with that said, let's get straight into the video. Can you believe that Volume 12 supposedly released 5 months ago? I feel like time has been going by so fast. Anywho, not too long ago, around some point last month, I'm gonna absolutely butcher this, and I'm so sorry. Snekemius, Snek. We're just gonna go with Snek, okay? I'm not putting that in the video. Snek, the person who translates the Adachi and Shimamura light novels, finished chapters 2 and 3 of Adachi to Shimamura Volume 12. Now, when I tell you guys that I've been waiting on these, I really mean that. Adachi and Shimamura is literally my joy. I will always look forward to this series. But rather than focusing on both the new chapters, we are going to be focusing on a single one today. Specifically, if Shimamura went back to the... I know you guys were probably waiting for something more like went back to the what? But that's literally just what the title is called. If Shimamura went back to the... You gotta love the name of Adashima chapters. Now, the title of this video is probably something along the lines of... my new favorite Adachi and Shimamura chapter or something like that, which is actually like not a joke or just like anything like that. I'm not sure if I've ever stated it directly in a video. I think at some point I have. You guys are honestly gonna have to quote me on that. I feel like you guys would know that better than me at this point. But I've had a strong 3 favorite chapters that have never been triumphed so far in this series. Those being number 1, of course, Flight. How can you not love this chapter? The atmosphere, the characterization, the what is... Why do trains wait to go by the second I start recording? Like, for the last few hours, it's just been pure silence, and the moment I click anyways, back to whatever I was talking about. Flight, the atmosphere, the characterization. The atmosphere, the characterization... It's just full of everything that encapsulates this series. 2, surprisingly, I know this is going to be actually pretty surprising for you guys, but Summer 18. Now, for me, Summer 18 and Flight are competing very intensely for that number 1 spot. Now, the reason why I have Summer 18 so high in my personal favorites boils down to, honestly, a lot of reasons. But the most important being, since Summer 18 is part of Volume 11, one of the most recent volumes, there's a lot of character progression that can be seen within the chapter. You have Shimamura trying to understand Adachi, Shimamura and Adachi genuinely talking directly to one another about being intimate. It just really reinforces how far this series has come. We wouldn't see things like this 2 or 3 volumes ago, and I personally just love where these two are at right now in the light novel. But beyond that, there are some very unique themes discussed within Summer 18 that have left a lasting impact on me as well. You have Shimamura's realization about longevity that reinforces how she feels deep down about Adachi at this point. And on top of that, we also see a subtle rebellion against the world, embracing what they share together in the moment. And last but certainly not least, we have Words Most Mundane. Now, I know that this is kind of a strange one, especially when looking at all the chapters in Adachi and Shimamura, but for me, this is the chapter where Adachi honestly started growing on me as a character. I think a lot of you guys know that I'm a little bit of a Shimamura fan. I hope it's not too obvious, but Adachi really left an impression on me in this chapter. And something about her sweet nothings to her lover who accepts them all regardless of what they contain resonates so deeply with me. Let's start exploring what if Shimamura went to the...
Adachi-ken.
So, like a lot of the modern Adachi and Shimamura chapters, what if Shimamura went to the is set in an alternate timeline? In this timeline, Adachi and Shimamura have yet to make any progress. So we know when that sort of thing happens, our good friend Yashiro Chikama has to take the stand and intervene. And that she does, but she comes at an inconvenient time as Shimamura is on the verge of being hit by a car. Now, of course, Yashiro isn't just going to let that happen right before her eyes, so she saves Shimamura by lifting her and moving her out of harm's way. And all is seemingly well, as the Shimamura of this timeline has now met Yashiro, and has even been saved, but in no time at all, a new conflict rises to the surface. Japan is gradually being engulfed in a sudden storm, but rather than the storm just being limited to Japan, the storm is actually widespread. Definitely not your normal storm by any means, something that Shimamura also acknowledges. However, her new friend dressed in a strange costume, as always, seems to know exactly what's going on and explains it. Due to Yashiro's prior intervention where she saved Shimamura from the speeding vehicle, she's altered the course of events in this universe. In that accident, or accident to be, Shimamura was supposed to meet Adachi in that moment. If we resurrect a prior theme in this series, this would be what you call fate. Shimamura was fated to meet Adachi in that moment, but since she didn't, the very threads of the universe itself begin unraveling. After being informed by Yashiro that the reason why this abnormal storm is occurring is due to her not meeting Adachi, it becomes clear to Shimamura that well, what she has to do is go and meet Adachi. So the Shimamura of this timeline is assigned a quest: meet and befriend Adachi in order to repair the universe. Shimamura is initially conflicted. She doesn't even know anything about Adachi, and well, she's quite literally just met Yashido like a day ago. So Yashido takes the responsibility of reuniting the two, as all of this technically was her fault. And Yashido's grand plan for Shimamura and Adachi to meet is by going out and buying donuts and bringing them over to Adachi's house. Now, let's pause here for a very brief moment. Let's do some Adachi and Shimamura trivia. Let's test your guys' knowledge. What donut does Shimamura always get? And what donut does Adachi always get? Comment down below right now, no cheating, we'll get into the answer later. Following Yashido's plan, Shimamura and Yashido go out in the intense downpour to go purchase donuts. And something very interesting throughout their journey is that Shimamura begins feeling nostalgic. She feels as though her experiences with Yashido have happened at some point before. And once again, I don't think that we've ever seen this before in Adachi and Shimamura. A Shimamura that is experiencing memories, or rather, feelings of memories from a completely different timeline. This comes off as very interesting to me, and I wouldn't be surprised if this got expanded upon in later volumes. Yashido and Shimamura pick up the donuts, and right after, Yashido guides Shimamura to Adachi's house. When they arrive, rather than going in and interfering once more, Yashido leaves the rest to Shimamura. So, awkwardly, Shimamura rings Adachi's doorbell, and to her surprise, Adachi actually answers. Having nothing to say or talk about, the conversation immediately grows quiet. I mean, like, Shimamura literally just went to Adachi's house, someone who she has never interacted with before at this point, for essentially no reason from Adachi's point of view. But nonetheless, Adachi lets Shimamura in, and the two share a very Shimamura and Adachi-esque conversation. Very similar to our normal timeline, Adachi is confused, and Shimamura is the one doing the confusing. It's so funny to see how their dynamic remains the same no matter the timeline. After becoming slightly more comfortable with one another, Shimamura gives Adachi the donuts, and at random, she picks a honey dip. That was the answer for Adachi, by the way. Shimamura's was in Angel French. Let me know if you guys got that right. No cheating. While sharing the donuts and drinking the tea that Adachi prepared, Shimamura informs Adachi about her strange meeting with Yashido, and also reveals that she was pretty much forced to meet her or something bad would happen. Adachi misinterprets this as Shimamura hitting on her. But even more surprisingly, Shimamura doesn't necessarily deny it. She even goes as far as saying that that isn't her intention yet. We definitely see a lot more foreshadowing to later romance in this universe than any other one. This is still their first encounter, by the way, which is honestly pretty funny. Upon being informed about the gym's second floor by Adachi, Shimamura, despite being completely repulsed by the idea of being on top of that hot and stuffy gym's second floor, finds herself oddly intrigued. It's also in this moment where she realizes just how familiar she and Adachi already seem to be, despite only just now meeting. Now that's basically where this chapter ends. Shimamura and Adachi establish a connection, and following that, Yashido leaves and goes to the next set. And from this point onward, we can infer that Adachi and Shimamura in the next few days went to the gym's second floor, and from there the story played out like it normally would have without a hitch. But now that we've covered all of this, the question arises. Whadasha, why do you think of this chapter so fondly? And let me answer. From the start of this chapter to the end, it really feels like an OG Adachi and Shimamura chapter. It feels like our characters have rewinded some years, which, I mean, in essence is kinda true. We get to see our beloved characters again in their original states. Shimamura and Adachi are yet to have experienced things with one another, so it's like we're going back and experiencing this series again for the first ever time. Being able to replicate that feeling at will is potentially one of Iruma Hitoma's greatest feats as an author. This chapter not only brought forth a sense of nostalgia, but it even expanded upon that, introducing fresh experiences into this series that has already experienced so much, without fundamentally changing what makes this series. In that regard, this is truly a one-of-a-kind Adachi and Shimamura chapter that invokes so many feelings and is packed with so much. The subtle imagery of a rainy world in the background, in the midst of all the chaos between Yashiro and Shimamura and Adachi, is just the cherry on top. The moment I read this chapter, I immediately just thought, I need to talk about this. I need to draw attention to this because this is such a unique chapter. I feel like a lot of the things in this chapter are going to be expanded upon given time as well. But that said, that's all I have to say, you guys. Let me know what your favorite chapters from Volume 12 have been so far. I'm really curious. And what do you guys think about Volume 12? Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next one. It's 4 a.m. and I am so tired, but we have to make this video. I'm not gonna lie though, I got a laptop and it's been super helpful for, you know, also writing scripts when I'm like laying down. That's kind of why I've been able to get these videos out so much. I was gonna do a meme there, but I decided not to, so that's why I kind of like cut out. But like, can you guys tell that I've been like, what am I even Let's just start the video. As it stands now in our current Adachi and Shimamura continuity, Tadami is seemingly completely out of the narrative. After her final moments with Shimamura in Volume 10, where her feelings are put at the forefront and Shimamura denies them, we seemingly see Tadami for the last time. And no, seriously. After Volume 10, Tadami is like gone. What's also quite interesting is that Volume 10 was published in 2021. Tadami has been absent for 4 real-life years. However, Tadami is a character who has been in this series for a very long time. So the question arises, what will happen with Tadami? Will Tadami make a return? So the first thing that I want to completely erase right off the bat before we actually do any exploring is any form of romantic relationship with Shimamura, of course. I think we all knew that. Tadami deep down has feelings for Shimamura. She always has, as shown as far back as when they were children in Volume 11. And even in Tadami's own words during her final meeting with Shimamura, she wanted to be that special person for Shimamura. She couldn't be satisfied with just being friends. So with that in mind, anything less than that of a lover kind of erases any potential connection between Tadami and Shimamura. But as we know, that will never happen, which completely removes the possibility of us seeing Tadami and Shimamura ever again. Now that we kind of have an understanding of Tadami's current standing in the narrative, I want to explore something that I briefly talked about a year ago in this video right here. So I'm scrolling through YouTube to see if there's any. Oh my. This is me, dude. There is no way this is me. It's already been a year. I didn't sound like this a year ago. Did I actually sound like this? Okay, I digress. In this video, I mentioned that if we ever see Tadami again, it very likely won't be in the main narrative. Honestly, me, along with many others, just don't think that Tadami will have another appearance in this series. If she does come back, I think it's going to be something like regarding Saika, something like that. And I still believe in that. In the chance that we do see Tadami again, it will probably be in some separate timeline, or even a completely different entry in the Adachi and Shimamura franchise, in a very similar fashion to regarding Saika. As far as the main story goes, there's a very high chance that we just never will see Tadami again, but at the same time, there is still numerous ways that Tadami could reappear. For one, we could see a chapter dedicated entirely to Tadami. Throughout this series, pretty much every character so far, regardless of their position as a character, has had a POV chapter. From Hino all the way to Shimamura's mother and many more, we have seen so many unconventional characters receive chapters dedicated to themselves. And most of, if not all of these characters have had even more than one chapter dedicated to themselves. That alone substantially raises the chance for us to see at least something Tatami related. But if you're still not convinced, let's rewind the story a little bit. In Volume 4, Chapter 1, we get a one-time POV from a classmate that Adachi had in middle school. Now, this narrator never returns, but the fact that we saw a POV from someone who's not necessarily important to the story highlights Iruma Hitomo's willingness to explore characters that aren't as important as others. This also has just expanded over the last few years, as we've seen more POV switch chapters from Volume 10 to 12. In fact, I'm honestly surprised that we haven't seen anything from Tatami yet. Now, I know that Tatami is a pretty easy character to write off, and is even a character that a lot of the fandom surprisingly dislikes. But to me, Tatami is a character that I'm very fond of and has a lot of potential in this series. She's always been, and to this day, still remains one of my favorite Adachi to Shimamura characters. If you were to ask me, hey Whadasha, is it really that important if Tatami doesn't return? I'd probably tell you yes, it is. Throughout the last 6 years of the Adachi and Shimamura light novel, Tatami has been used as a foothold. She indirectly further developed Adachi and Shimamura's relationship, but when her purpose was served, she was kind of just erased after that. Whereas we see Shimamura come to terms with losing Tatami and realizing that there was no true way for them to ever rekindle, we don't ever see Tatami really come to that conclusion, as we've never had a Tatami POV before. Right now, it feels like a seed that's already been planted and has just kind of been forgotten about. I think that Tatami is a character who's been present long enough for us to see some sort of resolution from her, whether that's in the form of POV chapters or an entirely new entry. There are just a lot of points in the story where having narration from Tatami could contextualize a lot of events. For example, we have Tatami suddenly moving away. We don't know why she moved or how her life played out without Shimamura, or Tatami's development over that gap from elementary to high school as she noticeably changed. There's a lot to work with, so I do believe that we will see more from Tatami again in the future. But, of course, most likely never with Shimamura, which will be interesting. I really wonder how Iruma Hitomo will handle that. With that said, thank you all for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know how you guys feel about Tatami. Do you like her? Do you dislike her? Do you think we'll see from her again? And I'll see you guys in my next one.